Toot! With a loud and prolonged whistle, two sets of gigantic steam-emitting winches operate in unison, opening the night gate of the kingdom's canal. Dozens of cargo ships from the outer rivers, along with the dawn's glow on the horizon, sail into the kingdom's port. As the sun breaks through the dawn and leaps off the ground, its unstoppable radiance dispels the remnants of the dim night sky, and the kingdom, having slept under a million nightmare corpses, finally begins to awaken bit by bit. As the sunlight crosses the tower bridge over the canal, sweeps past the spire of the clock tower, and slips into the palace's windows, the woman lying on the desk trembles lightly, gently drawn out of her slumber by the warm sunlight. Did I fall asleep? Awakening from sleep, the princess stretches her slightly stiff body, then sits hugging her knees on the spacious chair, gazing somewhat dazedly at the desk in front of her. She remembers last night before nightfall, she brought all the execution documents for the tax reform, proposals for expanding citizen voting rights, and selection orders for military officers of the third rank back to her bedroom, preparing for a night-long battle by lamplight. But just as she struck off the stall tax concerning small craftsmen and wrote 2 rebuttal opinions, a sudden inexplicable drowsiness overwhelmed her mind, and then she knew nothing. Well, maybe not entirely nothing. After rubbing her somewhat numb face, recalling the strange dream she had after falling asleep last night, a slight smile curled at the princess's mouth. In the dream, she finished all the paperwork, and then at the council meeting a few days later, her words were sharp and cutting, causing the finance minister to faint on the spot, and she directly handed over the Ministry of Finance. Then she took the opportunity to win over the council, settled the old nobility trying to stab her, and grabbed control of all 17 major departments of the kingdom, starting sweeping reforms. Eventually, the kingdom slowly became stronger, and in the dream, she also ascended the throne, married Joshua off across the sea to a monkey, made Leon a prince, and gave birth to an entire soccer team. Ahem. In short, it was quite a good dream. Taking a sip of the now-cold coffee, the princess, in a good mood, got up from her seat, held up the coffee cup, and walked to the bedroom window, voluntarily basking in the sunlight streaming through the window. Although she accidentally fell asleep, failing to handle those documents in time, the result didn't seem too bad. For someone often plagued by nightmares, this kind of light-hearted yet somewhat absurd dream was quite a rare experience. Princess Veronica! Just as the princess was bathing in the warm morning sun, enjoying her rare moment of leisure, the bedroom door was suddenly knocked, and the voice of the night duty maid came anxiously from outside. "I'm Lily, who was on duty last night. Sorry, Your Highness, I seem to have fallen asleep as soon as night fell yesterday." "It's okay." After finishing the bitter black coffee in the cup, Princess Veronica put down the cup, stretched lazily, and said calmly, "I also slept very early last night. If there was something to be done, I would have awakened you, but remember, when it's your turn for night duty next time, be sure to get more rest during the day." "Thank you, Your Highness. I'll remember that." Hearing she hadn't delayed the princess's matters, the maid outside the door secretly breathed a sigh of relief and then eagerly reported, "Your Highness, according to the original itinerary, after breakfast, you'll meet with the president of the Kingdom Business Association. If it's finished within 2 hours, you also need to meet with a few newly elected parliament members from different districts, and after lunch, there's the envoy from the Black Forest Duchy. Shall I call a maid to help you freshen up?" A shame, finding a rare moment of leisure, but right now, business is pressing, and with the council about to reconvene in a few days, it's not the time to enjoy leisure. After hearing the pressured inquiry from the maid, the princess sighed softly and rubbed her temples, saying, "A bit later then. What about the afternoon? How is the afternoon itinerary arranged? What's the earliest it can be cleared up by the afternoon?" "Well, afraid not in the afternoon." The maid outside the door carefully reminded, "Your Highness, your schedule today is quite tight, going all the way until 8 o'clock in the evening. Even dinner is pushed back to after 9:30. But if you really need some free time, I could try to rearrange it for you by postponing the meeting with the Minister of Defense to tomorrow afternoon." "Postpone it to tomorrow afternoon. and that would push back tomorrow afternoon's matters as well, right? Besides, the selection of military officers can't be delayed, considering Leon always wants to annul the marriage contract with her. To be safe, it's best to accomplish all tasks while this union remains relatively stable, lest unexpected complications arise. Never mind. No need to change. Just follow the original itinerary. After weighing the importance of matters, Princess Veronica furrowed her brow in thought and then instructed, "Do this. I'll skip dinner today. Leave me free time after 9 o'clock. Your Highness." Hearing the princess's words, the maid outside the door was slightly stunned, and then proposed with concern, "I should rearrange the schedule for you because your stomach problems haven't improved. It's really unsuitable." "You've misunderstood." Interrupting the maid, the princess chuckled and said, "I'm not skipping dinner. I'm just not returning to the palace. Please help me invite the Duke of Lionheart for dinner. It would be best if he picks the location. If he has no preference, then make a reservation at one of the 2 restaurants I frequently visit, in any of the ordinary boxes by the river with plenty of open spots." "Okay. I'll arrange it right away. Go ahead." After the maid left as instructed, the princess returned to her desk and continued her work. Behind her, on the shelf, a tin doll with a half-shattered cheek quietly blinked its green glass eyes. The sun rises and falls from east to west. After making a round in the misty sky above the kingdom, the radiantly bright morning sun sank below the horizon once again. Immediately, the tall streetlights on the roadside lit up one after another, casting a shallow glow over the dreary night. A plain, unmarked carriage glided through the night opened by the street lamps, ultimately halting in front of a restaurant on Joyful Street in the Canal District. "Your Grace, we have arrived." As she politely opened the carriage door, the short-haired, chestnut-haired maid beamingly said to Leon, "You can go directly to Box 7, Princess Veronica, and the meeting with the Prime Minister just concluded. She'll arrive in no more than 15 minutes. Please wait a moment." "Okay." Leon nodded in response to show that he understood, then got up and alighted from the carriage. At the lady official's request, he donned a cloak and hood, concealing most of his face, and then entered a roadside restaurant named Golden Herbs, where he found the private booth the princess had reserved in advance. Seriously, even having a meal has to be so clandestine, like an underground party rendezvous. After silently mocking the princess's peculiar dining style, the ravenous Leon took off his cloak and sat in the obviously meticulously prepared booth, patiently waiting for his dining partner to arrive. However, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, a full 40 minutes passed, and the princess who claimed she'd definitely arrive within 15 minutes was nowhere in sight. And having slept an entire day since returning home that morning, with his last meal still being lunch yesterday, Leon was truly so hungry his eyes were almost turning green. "Perhaps I should order something to eat first." Unable to wait any longer, Leon asked the waiter for a menu, planning to order something to fill his stomach. Yet upon seeing the prices on the menu, he decisively abandoned the idea of ordering, opting instead for 2 glasses of plain water. No choice, although being a cleaner is considered a high-paying career. He wasn't unable to afford it, but he had only received 2 months' salary so far, and after paying rent, tuition fees, furnishing his home, purchasing medicine for Anna's health adjustment, and cigarettes for the unlucky black goat. After tallying up all these expenses, the remaining balance wasn't substantial, and with Anna, who managed his accounts, sent away by him from the capital, if he ordered and the princess didn't show up, he'd have a hard time getting by before Anna returned next week. Seriously, I just repelled an evil god attempting to invade the mortal realm yesterday, and I can't even bring myself to have a good meal. I need to request another fieldwork allowance from the director. Pinching his empty and pathetic wallet, Leon couldn't help but shake his head. Just as he stood up to leave the booth and find a more affordable place to fill his stomach, hurried footsteps sounded outside the booth. "Leon." Pushing the booth door open in haste and seeing Leon still there, the travel-worn princess immediately breathed a sigh of relief, then apologetically said, "Something just came up and delayed me. I'm sorry. Did you wait long?" "It's all right. Probably a few more hours before I starve to death. Responding with a hint of annoyance, Leon glanced at the weary-faced princess, whose elbow was slightly bleeding, hesitated a bit, then asked in surprise, "Weren't you meeting with the Prime Minister? How did you end up in such a mess?" "Because someone set me up." Upon hearing Leon's question, the princess gave a bitter smile, then said helplessly, "Recently, the Minister of Defense and I have been promoting the selection and replacement of military officers, attempting to gradually replace those positions filled through family connections within the ranks of officers and sergeants. The proposal concerning this selection order was supposed to be presented at the upcoming parliamentary session, but someone leaked it prematurely, and not just this issue was leaked, but also my schedule today. Then, those officers worried about being replaced, incited by certain individuals, banded together to block me outside the Prime Minister's residence. The patrolling guards must have been informed as well, as nobody stopped them along the way. After blocking the residence, they threw stones inside and nearly broke through the guards to rush in. I barely managed to escape, and it's during that time my arm got injured. Ah, no wonder even Emil feels like sneaking around. It seems the princess's life isn't easy either. Glancing at the panting, sweat-glistened forehead and blood-dripping elbow of the princess in front of him, Leon's resentment eased a bit. Then he retrieved the plague-infected blood band from the mirror world and said with slightly sympathetic eyes, "Judging by your wound, it'll probably leave a scar. Would you like me to help treat it?" "Yes. Of course, please do." After checking Leon's expression, Princess Veronica smirked, then sat beside Leon with a gleeful glint, rolling up her sleeve to expose her fair arm. Leaning her wounded elbow towards him, she said in a sweet voice, "Leon, I'm glad you're here. I feel like you're trying to set me up again." Watching the princess gazing at him fondly, eyes seemingly twinkling with stars, Leon felt a slight paralysis on his scalp. Then he grumbled, "Stop pretending. If you rushed here from the Prime Minister's residence, it takes at least 20 minutes. There's surely enough time to treat the wound and bandage it, right?" "Well, I was eager to see you." Not embarrassed by being caught feigning sadness, the princess continued to hold up her pale arm with a smiling gaze, responding, "Both of us are usually so busy. It's rare to have some free time. Naturally, if we can hurry, let's hurry, and take advantage of the break to gather as much as possible. Otherwise, how will we maintain our marital relationship?" "No, I haven't even married. Where do we have a marital relationship from? Did you get it from Heaven's Bank with a loan?" Leon rolled his eyes at her remark, then grabbed the pale arm waving before him, intending to wrap it with the plague-infected blood band. Yet as the soft, cool feeling of the princess's delicate arm found its way into his hands, almost like an exquisite coolness wrapped in water, he paused slightly and unconsciously gave it a gentle squeeze. MMM. Apparently, his action tugged at the wound, and Princess Veronica let out a soft hum, furrowing her beautiful brows ever so slightly. Upon realizing what he'd done, Leon's face flushed faintly red, and he began hurriedly wrapping the bandage, even accidentally winding it around his fingertip a little in his haste. All done. After hastily activating the plague-infected blood band, as effect to heal the princess's arm wound, Leon slightly avoided his gaze and unwound the bandage. However, the fair arm didn't retract, instead suddenly lifted, brushing softly against the corner of his lips. Question mark. Feeling the warmth and softness at the corner of his lips, Leon paused in confusion, quickly pushing aside the arm before frowning and glaring back. "What are you doing?" "Nothing." Noticing Leon's slightly reddened ears, Princess Veronica blinked and covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes curving into crescent moons as she chuckled. "You were staring so intently earlier. I thought you liked it." "I'm not interested." "You even gave it a squeeze." "Would you like to squeeze again?" "You may continue if you wish, I don't mind." "If you don't speak up, I'll assume you." "Order the food already. I'm starving." All right, I'll follow your lead." After pushing the menu stand over and seeing the princess's half-smiling face, Leon wished desperately for a crack in the ground to open up so he could crawl right in and never emerge again. Darn. Seriously. Why couldn't I control my hand just now? Haha. I got you. Seeing Leon, who was full of resentment when she first arrived and now instinctively turning his head, not daring to meet her gaze, Princess Veronica smiled triumphantly. She then lowered her sleeve to cover her arm and elegantly picked up the menu standing at the side of the table. Teasing has come to a natural pause, as continuous teasing is unwarranted. Though the little man has a tender face, his temper isn't mild, and if overdone like last time, he tends to retaliate. Red wine eel, duck confit, apple pie, onion soup, potato stew. And 2 more caramel custards, please. After calling in the waiter waiting outside and rattling off a list of dishes as if reciting cherished treasures, the princess handed the menu to Leon, smiling. Though the names sound quite ordinary, the dishes at this place are really excellent. I strongly recommend you try them. Is there anything else you're particularly interested in? No, that's enough. After glancing at the prices elegantly written on the menu, Leon, whose teeth nearly ached, shook his head and said, "You've already ordered plenty. Let's just have these. By the way, what's the occasion today? Why did you suddenly invite me to dinner?" "Of course. It's because I miss you." In response to Leon's question, the princess who had taken the seat opposite blinked her eyes, leaned forward slightly, and with her ample chest gently pressing against the table, rested her chin in her hand and said with a playful smile, "When a couple is madly in love, they want to stick together every moment, and I'm no exception." Leaning back in his chair to avoid her slightly, Leon rubbed his temple wearily and said, "Can't you just talk properly?" "Sure." Upon hearing Leon's request, the princess's bright smile faded slightly. Her graceful spine was instantly straightened, her swan-like neck raised, and she said in a calm and dignified tone, "Your Highness, I order you in the name of the first Princess Veronica not to compete with me for my favorite red wine eel. And when the apple pie is served, you must cut it into small pieces and feed me with a fork. Do you understand?" Never mind I said anything at all. Realizing it was futile to say more as he'd only end up being teased repeatedly, Leon had to proactively change the subject, saying, "What are you planning to do about the Ministry of the Military? So many people oppose you, they've even publicly stormed the Prime Minister's residence and thrown stones at you. Are you still going to push forward with that selection decree?" Upon hearing Leon's question, Princess Veronica was a bit startled. She then put away the humor in her eyes and replied softly, "Of course I'll keep pushing. Why wouldn't I do the right thing? Even purging junior officers isn't enough. Once this round of selections is done, I'll even target senior officers. The kingdom's Ministry of the Military has been in decay for far too long. Changing just some mid to low-level officers isn't enough to alter the situation. If I don't seize this opportunity to inject some fresh, dynamic blood, any reforms by me and the defense minister will only be superficial patch-ups. You're going to target even higher ranks?" Seeing the peculiar gleam in the princess's eyes, Leon couldn't help but ponder along her line of reasoning. The kingdom's military structure is quite complex if you delve into it, but broadly speaking, it can be viewed as a hierarchy of marshal, general, colonel, captain, and soldier, just like the administrative system of governance, administration, documentation, assistance, and general affairs. If a marshal is the head of the military, and a general is its backbone, then the colonel, captain, and soldier levels are the flesh and sinews. The princess wants to use Parliament to purge those semi-hereditary lower officer cadres, which is pretty much akin to ripping flesh from bone. Naturally, the vested interests within the military won't remain unresponsive. In fact, it's likely the officer protest at the Prime Minister's residence was silently endorsed. "Are you sure you can pull it off?" Curiosity piqued by the princess's response, Leon, despite his growling stomach, inquired with interest. "Although Parliament also wishes to limit noble power, your selection decree essentially strikes at the core of the nobility. They will certainly fight back fiercely. Do you think the Prime Minister and the lower house will support you?" "Indeed they won't. Most MPs of the lower house are profit-driven. neither willing nor able to meddle with the military. When it comes to interests with no direct benefit to them, they'll side with whoever offers the better perks. After responding to Leon's question, the princess curiously countered, "Leon, do you have an interest in these political trades?" "Not really interested, Percy. It just happened to come up, so I thought I'd ask." "Is that so?" Seeing Leon's expression, the princess couldn't help but slightly raise her eyebrows. "You think you're switching to a serious topic to avoid my teasing, so I'll follow the seriousness, don't you? Well, you've got it wrong. All right then, since there's some time before our food arrives, I'll also indulge you with some insights." Having a sly premonition of Leon's intention, the princess blinked playfully before lowering her head slightly, feigning a gentle sob, and said, "Thanks to my dear prince, the military is currently under my command. So of course I have to seize this opportunity to accomplish something. In case I fail to win back a certain little man's affections and he decides he doesn't want me anymore, at least I would have left behind a reformed military department, not entirely wasted being bullied by him for so many days." Upon hearing the princess's words, Leon couldn't help but twitch at the corner of his mouth. He then pointed at his nose and said, "Me? Bully you? Can you touch your conscience before making such claims? Let me try." With an amused blink, the princess lightly pressed her hand over her heart, causing a surge of swelling waves, and with a gentle sigh, she said, "Too thick. Can't feel it." "Are you staring at me like that because you want to help me find my conscience?" "I won't." "Oh." Watching Leon opposite slightly close his eyes in embarrassment. Unsure of where to look, Princess Veronica couldn't help but let out a light laugh. However, to avoid Leon becoming angry out of embarrassment, she sat up straight again and began speaking earnestly. "In any case, I am determined to push the selection decree forward. Out of the 37 generals in the kingdom, 31 are of noble birth, and more than half of the colonels are also nobles. To them, military orders might not be as effective as their family heads' commands. Only by replacing a significant portion of these individuals and ensuring the smooth conveyance of military orders can I truly take control of the military. Subsequently, I'll use this to pressure Parliament and make the lower house and other noble-dominated departments make concessions. Leon, what do you think?" "I think it's pretty good." Somehow sensing that the princess wasn't truly asking about political affairs but more about his conscience, about her, Leon maintained a straight face, trying to steer the conversation back, and said, "Power comes from the barrel of a gun. Strengthening hold on the military before implementing other reforms is indeed a wise approach." "Oh?" A little surprised by Leon's comments, the princess's beautiful eyes shifted slightly before nodding. "Your remark is quite, When I first approached the defense minister, it was also motivated by such considerations. Leon, let me ask you this. If you were this princess, what would you do?" "What would I do?" Looking at the princess leaning slightly forward, her gaze filled with hopeful anticipation for an answer, Leon instinctively glanced at her bosom and then quirked his mouth, saying, "If it were me, I would rally a troop of guards to storm the royal palace, forcing your dad to immediately hand over the throne. Anyone daring to object would be hanged. Oh, and your brother would be shipped across the sea and made to marry a bunch of female monkeys." Narrow-minded man. Upon hearing Leon's answer, knowing the reason he said that was to retaliate for her earlier teasing, the princess couldn't help but glare at him in feigned annoyance. "Stop messing around. I genuinely want to hear your opinion," putting away any thoughts of flirtatious banter. Princess Veronica straightened up and said earnestly, "What you said just now was interesting. Although it was a bit blunt, it indeed captured the essence of power. You haven't been involved in politics, but you don't seem dull to these matters. In fact, there's a kind of, very unusual sharpness. So, if possible, could you talk to me about your thoughts? For example, what do you think about the things I've been doing these past few years? From your perspective, what do I think?" Looking at the princess across from him, who was genuinely eager to hear his thoughts, Leon pondered for a moment, then replied somewhat insincerely, "What you've been doing is great. At least you're always doing the right things. And indeed, many people's lives have improved because of your efforts. Is that really what you want to say? Sensing something else in Leon's somewhat perfunctory praise, Princess Veronica looked into his eyes and then cautiously asked, Leon, do you not agree with what I've been doing? I do agree. What you're doing can indeed make the kingdom better. Considering that he was still relying on her to pay for this meal, Leon thought carefully and said as tactfully as possible, but your goal is probably not just to make the kingdom a little better. You've put so much effort into dealing with the military for something more, right? Princess Veronica hesitated upon hearing this, feeling the topic might not be quite appropriate, but after looking at Leon across from her, she seriously admitted, I do want more. I don't just want to be the next queen of the kingdom, but the best queen. You know, Joshua doesn't have the talent necessary to be a good king. If he becomes king, the entire kingdom will fall into the hands of the finance minister and the queen, and all my efforts for over 6 years will be in vain. I absolutely cannot let that happen. Leon, although you might not believe it, I don't have a strong desire for power. What I truly hope for is for the kingdom to become strong and maintain that strength, so that tragedies like the War of Defense never repeat on this land again. I've never doubted that. Indeed, you are not someone with a strong desire for power. To you, power is more like a tool to achieve your goals. What you are truly pursuing is something else. Having seen the essence of the princess's soul, Leon nodded, indicating his willingness to believe her words. However, after seeing the clarity and determination in her eyes, he couldn't help but gently remind, but I think your reforms might be very hard to succeed. Even if there are some results, they're unlikely to reach the kind of outcome you hope for. The final situation will most likely differ greatly from the result you want. Are you mentally prepared for that? The things I'm doing might likely end in failure? After hearing Leon's words, Princess Veronica slightly pursed her lips. However, she didn't immediately argue back, but instead looked into Leon's eyes and softly asked, Can you tell me why you feel that way? Am I starving so much that I've lost my mind? She's a princess, after all, and I'm actually saying these things to her. Seeing the stubbornness in her eyes, clearly not willing to relent without an answer, Leon couldn't help but feel a hint of regret. Regarding the princess's so-called reforms, he did feel they were unlikely to succeed. In fact, he had thought so even earlier than today. Yet he was only partially knowledgeable, so not very certain about this idea. Plus, though the princess's reforms had issues, they did indeed improve the lives of ordinary people in the kingdom. Moreover, he and she didn't have a deeply established relationship, so discussing this seemed somewhat presumptuous, and thus he had never mentioned these things. However, he had just caught a glimpse of her 10,000 Menagoforth essence from her eyes, and feeling reluctant to see her dreams shattered in the future, he instinctively shifted the conversation toward this topic. Since I'm already here, might as well say something? Actually, right now it's just a thought, not necessarily the correct one. Slightly raising his head to meet the princess's calm gaze, Leon gently said, Take it with a grain of salt. If you find what I say makes some sense, perhaps consider it. But if you think what I'm saying doesn't make much sense, then simply forget it and continue doing what you want to do, because no matter what you're doing now is not wrong. After setting the stage for himself, Leon didn't directly express his views, but instead posed a question. Your Highness, if you were to simply categorize the political forces of the kingdom based on their camps, what might it look like? In terms of camps, Princess Veronica thought for a moment and then responded, The ones represented by me and the Minister of Defense should be considered the reformist faction. Those promoted by the lower house, the Prime Minister and the cabinet officials he appoints, along with some of the new nobility risen through commerce, they should be considered the parliamentary faction. Finally, the old nobility holding the upper house, along with the remaining new nobility, collectively count as the noble faction. Currently, there are mainly these three factions, but with Joshua having the support of the finance minister and the queen, constantly wooing the nobility, it barely counts as a half-faction. So it's the reformist faction, parliamentary faction, noble faction. and a Mary the Monkey faction. Not much different from what I learned before. Nodding towards the princess, Leon continued to ask, "Then, can you tell me, these 3.5 factions, whose interests do they specifically represent? Whom are they speaking for? Whose interests specifically?" Upon hearing Leon's question, Princess Veronica frowned slightly, not quite understanding the point of his question, but still answered truthfully. "As the leader of the reformist faction, I'm backed by the royal family, naturally representing the royal family. The old nobility represents themselves, while the parliament represents mainly the interests of big merchants. The remaining Joshua, although also representing the royal family, differs somewhat in meaning from me. I represent those who wish to suppress the nobility, trying to reclaim power for the royal family, whereas Joshua represents those royal family members who have familial ties but value the original family, leaning towards coexistence." "Are you sure?" "What? I mean, are you certain you represent the royal family's interests? Are you really speaking for the royal family? It seems you should understand what I'm trying to say now." Seeing the princess's sudden startle and her involuntary clenching of her fists, Leon sighed and said, "Just like you summarized earlier, you and your reformist faction represent a royal family that wants to reclaim power, rather than one that wants to strengthen the kingdom, so ordinary people are no longer suffering. For the royal family and even the king, the reforms you are advocating are not the ultimate goal. They are merely a means to reclaim power. The reformist faction you represent is actually not speaking for the royal family." Upon hearing Leon's summary, Princess Veronica instinctively wanted to refute, but after considering the situation of the royal family, she couldn't help but press her lips tightly. "Indeed, what I want has never been what the royal family wants. Even among the reforms I push forward, many cut into the royal family's flesh. So although my greatest power comes from the support of the royal family, I have never truly been a spokesperson for the royal family. Moreover, among the 4 factions currently in the capital, the distinction between your reformist faction and the other 3 factions is very significant." Seeing the princess' lips turning a bit pale from pressing her lips tightly, Leon hesitantly reminded, "Whether it's the noble faction or the parliamentary faction, they all speak for their respective classes and fight for the interests of their backing powers. Only your reformist faction is different. Your greatest support comes from the royal family, but what you want to promote and fight for greatly conflicts with the royal family's interests, even completely contradicts them, so your base, in reality, isn't as stable as the other 3 factions. Nothing has gone wrong yet because your main goal in the past has always been to reclaim the power seized by the old nobility, along with regulating commercial activities to avoid the parliament passing some outrageous proposals. This aligns with the royal family's idea of reclaiming power. After all, your identity is that of a princess, and the piece of the power cake you take is equivalent to entering the royal family's mouth. So the royal family has always supported you, but it will be different from now on, right?" Leaning powerlessly against the back of the chair, Princess Veronica, pale-faced, said, "Father, the royal family's tolerance of me only extends to those insignificant parts. Once I attempt to fully implement reforms, begin to divide the cake in the royal family's hands, the support for me will immediately stop. This is truly... I originally thought those measures could revive the stagnant kingdom, even make it increasingly strong, such beneficial things for the entire royal family. Naturally, they'd also be willing to support me, but I was too naive. Not necessarily, after all, I'm merely guessing out of thin air." Seeing her somewhat lost look, Leon couldn't help but open his mouth to comfort. "The measures you're promoting could potentially enlarge the kingdom's cake, and the royal family might still support you. These things may not necessarily happen." "It's not may not, it's definitely going to happen." Her beautiful eyes closed slightly. Leaning powerlessly against the back of the chair, the princess bitterly smiled and said, "Before you appeared, even though I was well aware of Joshua's incompetence, Father, he was always trying to marry me off, and all the targets chosen were people from other kingdoms. I used to think he was preparing to marry me off far away when I hit a wall with my reforms, and the conflicts between the kingdom's factions intensified to quell disputes and stabilize the chaotic situation. But now it seems he probably thought even earlier, After thinking about the documents I brought home yesterday, Princess Veronica said with complex eyes, "If I'm not mistaken, Father should be patiently waiting now. He's waiting for me to implement the selection order, complete the military overhaul, suppress the old nobility's influence in the military. Waiting for me to propose the expansion of citizen voting rights at the parliament meeting in a few days, slowly diminishing the power in the hands of big merchants and the prime minister. And after I've done these two things, helping him eliminate the noble and parliament hindrances, he just needs to casually find a distant kingdom to marry off his troublesome daughter with unrealistic dreams, and then everything remaining won't be a problem. Haha, no family ties, only interests. This really is the style of the royal family." Glancing at the silent Leon opposite, Princess Veronica self-deprecatingly smiled and said, "Clearly, just completing the marriage alliance with you could thoroughly advance the reforms, but I went to Father several times, and he ultimately gave no direct statement, instead showing some ambiguous intentions. I originally thought he wanted to put Joshua on the king's throne, so he didn't want me to hold too much power, giving Joshua a chance to struggle, but what I didn't expect was he never really considered me as his daughter. I am just a tool to sweep away obstacles." It seems I've stirred up trouble. Seeing the princess's fair neck reveal faint greenish veins and an abnormal flush on her cheeks, Leon couldn't help but open his mouth, wanting to comfort her but not knowing what to say. He could only dryly say, do you want to eat something first?" "Sorry, I don't think I can eat." The princess, who had always maintained a stable emotion, this time rarely showed her fragility, pale-faced and gave a bitter smile before directly standing up, stumbling towards the door. Noticing her emotional instability, Leon quickly reached out to support her, then couldn't help but inquire, "Where are you going?" Princess Veronica, holding her arm by Leon, gritted her teeth, then took a deep breath, pushed Leon's hand away, and pursed her lips. "I need to go back and finish what I have to do." "What you have to do? What do you mean by what you have to do?" Hearing her answer, Leon's heart couldn't help but suddenly skip a beat. Given your current mental state, the so-called what you have to do, won't it be what I mentioned earlier, gathering a team of guards to storm the palace, forcing your father to relinquish the throne immediately, and hanging anyone who dares oppose? I was merely chatting about politics with you while waiting for a meal. How did it turn into a bloody coup? Do you want to think about it a bit more?" Seeing the princess's eyes filled with 3 parts resentment, 6 parts unwillingness, and 1 part inescapable sorrow, Leon hurriedly held her back, somewhat incoherently trying to dissuade. "I'm not against you fighting for your own justice, but shouldn't you prepare more? If you charge into the palace now, what if you're unprepared and lose to the palace guards, and get countered by your father? You should at least plan for a few more days." What nonsense are you talking?" Hearing Leon's words, even filled with anger, Princess Veronica still couldn't help but pause her expression, then stomped her feet forcefully and glared back in frustration. "Regardless, he's still my father. He wants to marry me off, not harm me. How could I possibly do something like that?" "Oh, that's how it is." After taking a long breath, releasing her grip on his arm and sitting back down again, Leon saw Princess Veronica's lips slightly move. "Why do I feel? You seem a little disappointed that I didn't act impulsively just now?" Realizing that the princess didn't have any intention of storming into the capital and directly forcing the old king to abdicate, Leon couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, then asked, "Since you don't plan to storm the palace, what exactly are the things you have to do that you mentioned just now?" "I meant the officer replacement order and the bill to expand citizen suffrage. Why did you think I was going to storm the palace with people?" After causing a bit of a fuss with Leon, the princess's agitated emotions calmed down a bit. She then sat back in her seat, explaining with a complex expression, "Like you said before, no matter what the final result is, what I'm doing right now is not wrong. After all, by replacing those unqualified officers who climbed the ranks just due to their background, only then can the corrupt military breathe a little. And right now, most of the parliament members have a business background. Even those who aren't from a business background have received business sponsorship before being elected. Only by expanding citizen suffrage can we dilute the excessive influence of businessmen in parliament. These are things that need to be done. They can't just be stopped. So, even knowing that you've been played by the old king, are you still going to see this through to the end? After looking at the princess with some admiration, Leon probed and asked, "And then? What are you planning to do next?" And then, hearing Leon's question, Princess Veronica couldn't help but bite her lip again, then said helplessly, "Take it one step at a time. Leon, my mind is a mess right now. I've thought countless times over the years about what to do if reforms can't be implemented or if issues arise during the process. But I really never thought about what to do if if the royal family suddenly turned against me. I still need some time to think about it carefully. Anyway, thanks for the reminder." Saying this, the princess, whose emotions had stabilized a lot, first looked at Leon with gratitude, then sighed with a slightly lonely expression. "I used to think that as long as I did well enough and found a feasible new path for the kingdom, my father would trustfully pass the throne to me. After all, although he has objections to my ideas, he's always been supportive. But now it seems maybe I was out of the game from the beginning. His chosen successor has always been Joshua. After all, if you lack skills, you can learn, and if you can't learn, you can delegate to someone capable. And my problem seems to be bigger. For him and the entire royal family, I'm somewhat, how should I say it? You've betrayed your class origin, or to be blunt, your stance isn't aligned with the royal family. Yes, that's about it." Hearing Leon's words, the princess couldn't help but instinctively adjust her ample figure, moving to the edge of the chair, then nodded helplessly. "Yes, that's the idea. To the royal family, I'm a maverick who betrayed them, but just say the first half next time. I'll probably understand what you mean. Also, class." After carefully pondering the word, the princess couldn't help but blink, then commented with a hint of admiration in her eyes. "Like steps dividing levels, arranged one step at a time upwards, clearly distinct from each other, almost impossible to cross without external force. The word you summarized really fits the current kingdom remarkably well. Like steps dividing levels." Hearing the princess's words, Leon was slightly taken aback. In his past life, he had heard that word many times, but mostly just listened in confusion, using it muddily. It was truly the first time he pondered its inherent meaning. Looking at the insightful princess, who grasped its meaning upon the first hearing, Leon fell silent for a moment, then probingly asked, "So, would you reconsider?" Upon hearing Leon's question, the princess blinked in confusion. "Reconsider what? Go back and storm the palace with people. Force your father to give up the position. Then, I'm feeling terrible right now. Can you please not joke about it?" Hearing Leon's words, the princess said with a mix of exasperation and amusement, "The only organized garrison in the capital is the palace guard, and the only one with the authority to deploy troops in the capital is the king. Not even the queen can do it. Even the guards by my side are sent by them, so who do you want me to take to attack the palace? Moreover, the kingdom is governed by the entire royal family. What people recognize is the soldiers the royal family can mobilize, the wealth the royal family owns, and those sitting within the 17 departments who are willing to listen to the royal family's orders and hold large amounts of the kingdom's affairs. Not that throne-representing chair. Even if I could conjure up an army and seize the throne, it doesn't guarantee taking over these soldiers, wealth, and power, and the nobles would oppose me instantly. Don't be fooled by the current struggle between nobility and the royal family. If I really broke the rules, the upper house would immediately convene a meeting to declare my throne invalid and nominate Joshua or another royal member to assume power. And those stability-pursuing merchant members of the lower house wouldn't endorse a queen who rose to power by breaking the rules. In short, if I really stormed the palace, everything would truly be over. Not necessarily. Patiently listening to the princess, Leon thought for a moment, then calmly analyzed. People are creatures of habit. The old king has been ill for the past 6 years, during which many of the kingdom's affairs have mostly been handled by you, and he only shows up occasionally. The royalist officials within the 17 major departments say they are loyal to the royal family, but in reality, they've been following your orders for the past 6 years. Some are even like the ministers of the military department, outright appointed by you. They've already gotten used to following your commands. So your advantage is much greater than you think. As long as you can stabilize the situation, these royalist officials may not stand against you. Most will choose to wait and see, or even actively offer allegiance. Regarding the soldiers, that's even less of a problem. As long as you can implement the officer replacement order, even if you can only change 3/10 of the mid to low level officers, your influence in the military department would be greatly amplified. If you can temporarily stabilize the situation, you might even garner unimaginable support. After all, on one side is an old rule that disregards talent for lineage, suppressing them for life, while on the other side is a chance to rise up, even intending to give them more under a new queen. The choice isn't a hard one, right? Leon? Watching Leon analyze the possibilities with burning eyes, the princess found herself suddenly astonished and incredulous, exclaiming, "Do you know what you're saying?" "Of course, I know what I'm talking about." Faced with Princess Veronica's questioning, Leon blinked, and then continued speaking. "And I haven't finished my words. Besides the officer elimination order, aren't you also preparing to propose the bill to expand citizen suffrage at the parliament meeting the day after tomorrow? This proposal, apart from diluting the merchants' influence and preventing them from excessively profiting from the royal family and nobility, also practically expands the power of Parliament, giving more groups the opportunity to speak up. I've read the newspapers. In the policies you've been implementing these past years, you've been strongly supporting the energy industry, reducing taxes for small craftsmen, subsidizing farmers, and recently even regulating the minimum hourly wage of factories. Therefore, big merchants do not support you much, but it's uncertain for other groups. I don't know how you see it, but I think that once the bill to expand suffrage is passed, a newly formed parliament not entirely controlled by merchants might be very welcoming to a new queen who has been striving for their interests. Could it really be seen this way? Watching Princess Veronica's slightly parted rosy lips and her expression full of amazement, Leon remarked meaningfully, "Actually, after hearing you talk about the officer elimination order and the proposal to expand suffrage, I even thought you were already preparing to ask the old king to abdicate. After all, the royal family will not truly support you, but the mid to lower ranks of the military and the new parliamentarians representing craftsmen, farmers, and workers can only choose to support you to stabilize their newly acquired positions and power. So, as long as you wait a bit longer and push these two matters through completely, the mid to lower ranks of the military and the new parliamentarians coming in after the expansion of suffrage will be fully tied to your chariot. To be honest, are you really not doing this on purpose?" I really never thought of this." After hearing Leon's words with her mouth open, Princess Veronica said with a somewhat bewildered look in her eyes, "The purpose of my restructuring of the military was because the military held by the old nobility was too corrupted, leaving the kingdom's armament in disarray, and expanding suffrage was because there were too many merchant-born legislators, and the proposals in the past 2 years have been too biased. This proves that you chose the kingdom, and the kingdom, in turn, chose you." After defining this coincidence, Leon stared into the princess's eyes, adjusted his emblem accordingly, and earnestly advised, "Whether intentional or not, what you've steadfastly been doing over these years has indeed given you returns, becoming your strongest support. So you don't need to feel uneasy, nor should you have any mental pressure. After all, you're not an ambitious person seeking power. You've simply done the right thing." "I just did the right thing?" Troubled by Leon's words and repeating this sentence twice in her heart, the princess unconsciously clenched the corner of her clothes with her palm, then bit her lower lip and shook her head, saying, "The mid to lower-ranking military officers and the new parliamentarians, although they certainly are strong supporters, they are only supporters. They haven't truly grasped power, while for the past few hundred years, the royal family and the nobility have led everything in the kingdom. They will never tolerate such behavior. If I really did so, it would be fine if it succeeds. But if it doesn't, the entire kingdom would certainly fall into chaos. And after the Icefield Kingdom just went through a harsh winter, once the weather warms up and they take advantage of the kingdom's internal unrest, there will be no chaos. Leon shook his head and then pointed at himself, saying, "Did you forget? I'm the biggest old nobility. You're worried the upper house might declare your throne invalid. But as the Duke of Lionheart, I'm the vice president of the upper house. Moreover, if necessary, I also have a good relationship with the last member of the Bauhinia family. I could probably secure her support, which means that the president and vice president of the upper house are now both on your side." "It's not the same." Facing Leon's suggestion, the princess, for some reason breathing a bit rapidly, hurriedly shook her head and said, "After the Ryan Blood Night, many key figures of the Ryan family perished, and Bauhinia has only Miss Emma left. The current twin pillars of the kingdom no longer hold the same status. Although according to the foundational laws, as long as your two families have people remaining, the seats of president and vice president must be retained. But when it truly comes down to it, you two can't decide the upper house's judgment. That doesn't matter. According to the kingdom's laws, when both the president and vice president concur, it's equivalent to direct approval in the upper house. If it can't pass, then it means there's a problem with the upper house itself." Having thought long about this issue, Leon said without blinking, "If the upper house goes against the will of both speakers and forcibly invalidates your throne, you can simply declare the upper house's judgment invalid under the kingdom's laws, can't you?" "Ha! My point is, don't play by their rules. At times like these, everyone should fight their own battles." Leon looked directly into the princess's eyes and, with heartfelt sincerity, explained, "You don't need to make the upper house acknowledge your throne. You just need a reasonable argument to start dragging and bickering with the upper house, making sure they can't justly declare your throne invalid, and that's considered a goal met. After all, as long as your throne isn't declared invalid, you are still the titular queen. The upper house doesn't have the power to muster forces and drive you out of the palace, while with the support of mid to lower ranking officers, you can instead mobilize forces to surround the upper house. After all, aren't they the ones who broke the law?" Could this really be possible? Seeing Princess Veronica, her thoughts not entirely open yet and still thinking of playing by the rules, Leon, his eyes gleaming, couldn't help but remind, "You've already said it, the only stationed troops in the entire capital are at the palace, the rest are all outside. Even if the guards of the noble manors are elite, facing an organized army with heavy weapons, what kind of waves can they raise? To be straightforward, under the current circumstances, if you don't care about legitimacy, you wouldn't even need to surround the upper house, because even with the power of the old nobility inside the capital, it's just one squad of guards. Just mobilize 2 squads, one to blockade the manors on Redwood Avenue to prevent people from coming out, and the other to block Lowther Arcade, pile up some random things along the riverway, and then the upper house is effectively dissolved on the spot. After all, to have a say in the upper house, one must at least be a viscount, and there are only so many nobles above viscount in the whole capital, all living on those 2 streets. If you trap their entire families, are you still worried they won't listen to you? To be even more blunt, you only want to succeed your father, you're not intending to take the lives of those old nobles. Given their loyalty to the royal family, do you think they would risk their entire family's lives in a deadlock against someone who can mobilize troops? Indeed, considering the nobility's level of loyalty to the royal family, no, such a thing never existed in the first place. It's not even something that requires a level to describe. As long as one isn't foolish enough to declare the abolishment of all nobility directly, and their core interests remain untouched, they will surely play dead without hesitation. If the situation becomes sufficiently clear, it's even possible they might directly switch sides. After pondering over Leon's words for a while, the princess couldn't help but bite her lower lip. Her plump legs beneath the long dress unconsciously came together and twisted tightly, an inexplicable tension rising within her. "I admit, it's not impossible indeed." Taking a deep breath, the princess, almost completely persuaded by Leon, pressed her fingernail into her palm forcefully, then said with pursed lips, "But what you are saying happens after success. Right now, there's only one army in the entire royal capital. I simply don't have the manpower to storm the palace, And what's more, he's my father, I really don't wish to. You can have the ideas, and you can have the manpower too. Interrupting the princess, Leon closed his mouth, took out the slightly trembling black goat from the mirror world, and then held the princess's hand, directly communicating through the soul. It's safer to speak like this. Remember the rebels who raided the boarding tower before? Oh? Upon hearing Leon's words, the princess's hand subconsciously tightened slightly. Then she said with some surprise, "You mean? You have a connection with those rebels?" "I've had some contact with them a few times." Considering what he's prepared to do, which is absolutely taboo with the cleanup bureau, Leon did not directly admit it, instead vaguely bypassing the topic, making a straightforward proposal. On the rebel side, there are a few hundred members who have received basic military training and can use simple weapons, and there are even a few exceptional item holders. So if you wish, I can help you make contact. But in exchange, once everything is over, you must issue an amnesty order for those regular members, absolving some of their crimes, and accept those who have not committed too many extreme acts. Additionally, once our Virgo sub-branch people arrive and capture those exceptional item holders, you must also pardon their death sentences and agree for them to join the cleanup bureau. Isn't your service a bit too thorough? Looking at the Leon in front of her who not only provided revolt guidance, but also put effort into her psychological construction, even offering people, resources, and plans, arranging everything meticulously from start to finish, the princess really felt a bit on edge. "How are you so skilled at this?" Grabbing Leon's palm forcefully, biting her lip, the princess stared into his eyes and said a bit exasperatedly, "What you've just mentioned, it can't possibly be thought through in just a day or two. You must have been pondering this for quite some time, right? Why would you think about these things for no reason?" "How could I not think about them? I even feel that what I'm doing now is far from enough." Grasping the princess's hand firmly to stop her from further scratching, Leon took a deep breath, his expression calm, and said, "Haven't you investigated my file? If you look carefully, you will know that before I joined the cleanup bureau, my family was genuinely out of options. However, in the documents you saw, it probably only states that Anna was critically ill and hospitalized, and I chose to join the cleanup bureau to save her. But you would never know what this simple description truly means to me." Recalling the future that the King of Nightmares displayed through his crown, the one he feared most in his heart, Leon's eyes dimmed slightly as he narrated that past for the first time actively. "More than 4 months ago, the military's consolation officer came for a revisit, determined that I had come of age, and in accordance with the new rules, stopped the military-dependent pension early. After that, Anna felt that the family couldn't hold on any longer, so she secretly stopped taking her medicine. Was there such a thing back then?" As Leon recounted, hearing about that struggling small family, which had been grappling for years and still nearly pushed to the brink, the princess's hands could not help but subconsciously tighten more and more, her delicate palms even unknowingly damp with sweat. She had seen Leon's sister, a gentle and beautiful girl who, when she smiled, liked to tilt her chin forward a little. However, appearing well-mannered and gentle Anna, who always wore a faint smile, was under such pressure from life that she could propose such a cruel request, truly tugging at her heartstrings and causing her to subconsciously lighten her breathing. Once Leon finished recounting his experiences, she finally exhaled a long breath, then grasped Leon's hand, her eyes full of remorse, and said, "I'm sorry. If I could have done a little better, even just a bit earlier, your family wouldn't have to suffer such things. Luckily, you joined the cleanup bureau, or else." "Yes, fortunately, I joined the cleanup bureau. But how many Leons have the opportunity to join the cleanup bureau?" Watching the princess's suddenly pale face, Leon's gaze was calm as he continued. "By joining the cleanup bureau, I temporarily freed my family from an unfortunate future. But for those Leons who have no cleanup bureau to join, they can only drag their sister's body at night and secretly throw it into the sewage river to exchange for the pension that should never have been stopped. And there are even more Leons who don't even have the opportunity to do this." "Leon, I'm sorry." Remembering the role she played in all this, the princess couldn't help but bite her lip until it turned white. lowering her head for the first time, unable to meet Leon's eyes. "I'm sorry, truly sorry. If I hadn't investigated the military and driven them to urgently cover their losses, your family wouldn't have." "No, you're not wrong." Leon shook his head and said, "You've always been doing the right thing. The wrong ones are not the ones like you who want to investigate the military, but those who created the deficits and then targeted the military-dependent pensions. Moreover, since you're not wrong, it must be something else that's wrong. Veronica, you asked me why I would think about these things, and this is the reason. I want to change those wrong things." Gripping the princess's slightly moist palm tightly, he pulled her a little towards him, then stared into her slightly evasive eyes, seriously stating, "I know you haven't made up your mind to do this yet, and asking you to disregard the bond between father and daughter and use force to seize your father's throne is rather challenging for you. But I sincerely hope you will seriously consider my proposal. This stagnant kingdom still has countless Annas who are sick, countless Leons with nowhere to join, waiting for a change that can save their lives. Leon, I don't know how to be a king, nor am I capable of being this savior, but you can." Reflecting on these short 3 years of life, with a fiery feeling in his heart, Leon released the princess's hand, then gently lifted her chin, turning her face towards him, staring into her uneasy eyes, and said each word with firm conviction. "Veronica, changing all of this only requires you to nod." Finally, watching Leon reach out to hold the princess's face and forcefully invite her to do big things together, the black goat couldn't help but hold its breath, a hint of excited flush appearing on its sheep face. "Finally got to wait for this moment. This kid is too cautious, doesn't act rashly when not confident. I originally thought I'd have to endure for another 3, 5, or 7 years, until he became powerful enough to see him driven by his own desires, starting to wantonly unleash his anger on this world. Unexpectedly, after joining the cleanup bureau, just 2 months of working diligently, he could no longer contain the flames in his heart and began making a move on this human kingdom. And once he uses this silly woman in front of him as a springboard to obtain the ability to act recklessly, the rage that has been fermenting in his heart for over 2 months, and finally ignited by the King of Nightmares, will completely sweep everything away. Just the slightest reverie about that beautiful future was enough to make the black goat, which had been suffocated for a long time, tremble with excitement. At that time, just extracting a small portion of nourishment from his rampaging fury will be enough for me to transform, and I will finally succeed. Amid the stunned expression of the black goat, a voice full of joy burst violently into its soul. "Wonderful! This is truly wonderful!" Through the eyes of the black goat, feeling the surging desires, it was as if it witnessed the seeds it had painstakingly planted for a long time finally breaking through the dark soil, tentatively protruding tender green buds. The heart of ambition couldn't help but laugh out loud. This ultimate ambition will surely bring ultimate power, and ultimate power will also give birth to ultimate arrogance. Once he completely controls the entire kingdom, this greed that swells to the extreme will surely aid me to return to the pinnacle. Aren't I the first one to arrive here? Who the hell are you to babble here? Unexpectedly, there were others, demons even crazier than itself. The black goat was instantly furious. Yet just as it was about to unleash a tirade in the soul against the heart of ambition, another extremely excited voice rang out. "This is greed. I feel the endless greed. This desire to dominate everything, making the entire kingdom conform to him. Are you blind? This is obviously endless ambition. But I clearly see. Bullshit. You two blind demons don't even have eyes, and you think you can see shit. This is absolutely the rampaging wrath that destroys everything. Ha! Who do you think you are? I am the strongest, so if I say it's arrogance, it is arrogance. I think it does not matter whose eyes they are. After all, with this endless greed as nourishment, your eyes will eventually become mine. Get lost. Do not come inside. Get out of my head." As the 3 demonic spirits were quarreling over Leon, starting to mock and curse each other, the princess, who was also troubled by Leon's question, was looking a bit helpless as she softly pleaded. "Leon, I really don't know what to do. Your words are a bit too sudden. Can you give me more time to think it over? Of course, since this matter should be led by you, the final decision must respect your will. Looking at Princess Veronica's eyes, understanding that this was the current limit, Leon did not continue to press, but nodded and withdrew his hand from her face. Thank you. As the burning palm left her cheek, Princess Veronica involuntarily let out a breath, then couldn't help biting her lower lip and softly inquired, Leon, I didn't nod just now. Would you be very disappointed in me? Leon was silent for a moment upon hearing this, then shook his head and said, I am disappointed, but not in you, since you were never obligated to do this. In fact, you only need to go back and make a clear stance, indicating a willingness to give up those proposals that could harm the royal family's interests and dilute the king's power, and there is a significant chance of inheriting the throne without taking such risks. It is rather me who is constantly exploiting your kindness, trying to force you to agree to my suggestion. So no matter what you decide in the end, I can understand. But not necessarily agree. After catching the implied meaning in Leon's words, Princess Veronica pursed her lips once more, then said with a complicated look, Leon, whether it's known to the kingdom or the cleanup bureau, the outcome for you wouldn't be too good. Aren't you worried that I would betray you? Leon looked at her upon hearing this, fingers pressing against the black goat beside him below the table, then said seriously, Would you?
No.
Using the sole vision of the black goat, Leon looked at the essence of the princess and nodded, saying, Then I'm not worried. Seeing Leon choose to trust her after just getting her verbal promise, Princess Veronica felt a slight warmth in her heart, then said softly with gentle eyes, Leon, may I ask you one last question? Go ahead. I want to know why you think I will change this country after becoming queen? Upon hearing this, Leon was slightly taken aback, then responded by asking, Aren't you already changing this country? Am I already changing this kingdom? Upon hearing Leon's response, Princess Veronica also froze slightly, then subconsciously tightened her fist. Yes, although the stagnant water hasn't been completely broken yet, just like Leon said before, I've always been doing the right thing. Even Leon is willing to take great risks to share his thoughts with me, which stems from his recognition of my efforts. So all these things I've been doing over the years haven't been in vain. Perhaps I've truly let some people see the light. Thank you. Filled with a profound sense of affirmation from Leon's response, the princess took a deep breath, relying on the remaining shreds of her rationality, barely restraining herself from agreeing on the spot. I will leave first. As for your proposal, I will definitely consider it carefully. Leaving behind these words, feeling her heart burning, she quickly walked out of the private room and left the restaurant, hurriedly stepping into the slightly chilly night breeze of the royal capital. Leon, who couldn't stop her in time, stood up, intent on following her out, but was politely and unavoidably stopped by the waiter standing by the door. Excuse me, sir. With a sympathetic glance at the abandoned Leon, the well-dressed waiter steeled himself, smiling courteously. The dishes you ordered are already being prepared. Is there anything else you need? What do I need? I need you to call back the one who's supposed to pay the bill. Looking at the waiter in front of him, who was examining him with a wary look as if afraid he might skip out on the bill, Leon's lips opened and closed slightly, but in the end, he couldn't bring himself to call the princess back to pay. However, after thinking about the prices on the menu, the recent financially strained leader of the rebellious faction awkwardly coughed before tentatively suggesting, Are there any dishes that haven't been made yet? After all, my lady companion had to go home due to an emergency, and I can't finish so much food by myself. Can a few of them be cancelled? I'm sorry, but all the dishes have already been prepared. However, I can hurry them up for you. All right then. What was I here for again? As Leon sat in front of a table full of sumptuous dishes, painfully consuming the most expensive meal of his life, the princess, riding in the carriage, suddenly remembered her original plan amidst the growling reminders from her stomach. Wait a minute. Today, I only wanted to invite Leon for a meal to slightly foster our relationship, to prevent him from constantly thinking about canceling the engagement. How did it turn from ordering dishes and chatting for a bit to a sudden change in conversation, discussing an armed coup to suppress the nobility and seize the throne? Moreover, I don't think we even got to eat. Pressing her growling stomach, recalling the bizarre development just now, the princess couldn't help but blink helplessly. Really, every time I'm alone with Leon, something is bound to go wrong. We went to watch a play and got attacked by anomalies, turning the play into acting. Later, when I visited to strengthen our relationship, I over-teased him, ending up being thrown on his couch for a night. And today is the most absurd. I only wanted a simple meal invitation, and to ask him to appear at the upcoming parliamentary meeting to help advance my proposal. But I was nearly convinced to directly instigate an armed usurpation. No matter what purpose I have after encountering Leon, things peculiarly deviate from the original plan, taking me down a new path I never anticipated, leading to an outcome completely unrelated to the initial intention. A strange man. But that doesn't seem so bad. Thinking this, for some reason, Princess Veronica suddenly raised her hand, gently touching her left cheek. Just a few minutes ago, a startlingly warm palm, not allowing any refusal, was holding it, asking me to answer his question directly. Who would have thought that the little man who couldn't withstand my light teasing actually had such a domineering side? Imitating Leon's action, attempting several times to hold her cheek, but failing to recapture that peculiar yet not unlikable feeling, the princess had to let her hand drop, leaning against the carriage's wall, trying her best to clear her chaotic thoughts, starting to ponder Leon's proposal. If I refuse Leon after the parliament ends the day after tomorrow, it won't take long before father, as king, demands the annulment of my engagement with Leon, planning to marry me off far away. Then not only will I lose the efforts of many years, but I'll also lose the chance to completely change the kingdom, watching countless Leons and Annas continue to struggle in painful lives. But if I choose to agree to Leon's proposal, it would mean severing the last bit of father-daughter relationship, and knowing father's stubborn character, he'd likely never speak another word to me until his death. Moreover, father has been king for nearly 20 years, and his esteem is considerable. To ensure the kingdom's stability, I must put him under house arrest. Given the old nobility's inevitable backlash following reform implementation, this period might last over 10 years, maybe even longer. Father has been ill for 6 years and his health has always been poor. If put under house arrest and dealt with anger, he might not survive until the situation stabilizes. The day the house arrest ends, what should I choose? Returning to the palace by carriage, full of indecision, the princess walked into her bedroom, stood before the shelves beside the table, and zoned out. Atop the shelves was a line of somewhat old-fashioned, yet evidently often wiped photo frames. The largest picture was of a young, healthy couple with a girl full of laughter in her eyes. Though the photo was a bit old and quite faded in the light, careful examination would still make the girl's features discernible, along with her heartfelt laughter. The girl in the photo wore a flower crown of wildflowers and sat on a swing made from planks and vines, swinging high into the sky, her carefree eyes so clear, devoid of any later guile or pretension. Behind the girl was a young man with deeply grooved tear ducts beside his nose, but his smile was gentle. He was posed to push, arms extended, energetically pushing the girl's swing into the high air. Not far from this father-daughter duo, a young woman, caught half-body in the frame, was sitting on a chair beside the swing, her eyes full of warmth as she watched her husband and daughter play. Father, mother. Gently touching the old photo, the princess slightly clenched her fist, moving her gaze down a level. A metal doll with a half-broken cheek smiled quietly, almost mournfully, leaning on the shelf. Its 2 emerald glass eyes gazed at her timidly, carrying a trace of inexplicable grievance. 6 years ago in Cornwall City, the ruined factory at the street's end, the beautiful syrup spilling onto the ground, the survivors hiding in the warehouse, the little girl hugging the doll and looking at me timidly, the aerial fuel bombs, the ignited syrup, the turbulent orange-yellow sea of flames. Upon seeing the metal doll, with eyes the same color as the girl's, 6 years' worth of nightmares surged uncontrollably into the princess's heart once more. Gently stroking the burn marks on the doll's arm, thinking of Leon's expression while recounting his past, the princess involuntarily bit her lip again. Knock, knock, knock. As the intense internal struggle waged within the princess, a knock sounded on the door. Your Highness. Upon receiving the princess's permission, 2 ladies-in-waiting opened the door and entered, respectfully stating, His Majesty knows you have returned and would like you to come over and discuss the situation after this afternoon's meeting with the Prime Minister. What happened after the meeting with the Prime Minister? Upon hearing the words of the 2 female officials, the princess instinctively touched her arm, feeling a slight warmth in her heart. Indeed, after meeting with the Prime Minister, she was first injured by the officers blocking the residence, then secretly climbed over the outer wall to find Leon. During this period, no news had been sent back, so her father was undoubtedly worried and had to send someone to inquire. Let's go. Nodding to the 2 female officials, the princess temporarily set aside her chaotic thoughts, ready to head to the upper levels of the palace. However, not that way, Your Highness. Stopping the princess, one of the female officials respectfully reported. His Majesty is not in the bedroom. He is waiting for you in the side hall on the 4th floor. Please come this way. The side hall on the 4th floor? At these words, the princess couldn't help but be slightly stunned. The side hall on the 4th floor of the palace is a small reception room for important guests. However, her father's health had always been poor, and at this time, he should have finished drinking his alchemical supplements and resting in the top-floor bedroom. Why would he be in the small reception room? Is there a very important guest visiting? After pondering for a moment, the princess, following the female officials, asked with some confusion. A special emissary from the Black Forest Duchy? Or a diplomat from the Kingdom of Sao? Neither, Your Highness. The female official in charge of leading the way respectfully replied. At least before we came, there were no external guests in the side hall. No guests have arrived? Upon hearing the female official's answer, the princess's brows raised in astonishment, just about to ask more, when the leading female official spoke. Your Highness, our duty is merely to guide you. As for other matters, as internal attendants, it is not our place to speak further. Please inquire directly to His Majesty after you meet him. Unexpectedly, just by asking about her father's situation, she inexplicably encountered a soft rebuff, making the princess's brows quietly knit, and the warm sensation in her heart was suddenly tinged with coldness. Unlike herself, when her father selects attendants, he doesn't value talents and character, but rather emphasizes caution, obedience, and the ability to accurately and aptly convey his will. In other words, these 2 attendants are the purest mouthpieces. Their attitude towards her, in a certain sense, represents her father's attitude towards her. And these always cautious and prudent attendants suddenly refusing to answer her questions could only be due to some instruction or perhaps an implicit awareness of something from her father's attitude and actions. Following the 2 stern female officials into the side hall on the 4th floor of the palace, the scene inside thoroughly verified her suspicions. In the side hall designated for important guests, there was not just the old king present, but also a man and woman, slightly resembling each other in appearance and seeming to be around 40 years old, sitting on velvet-covered armchairs, awaiting her along with the old king. Upon seeing the princess appear outside the door, the older-looking man revealed a gentle smile, nodding slightly at her, while the other exquisitely made-up, magnificently dressed woman subtly smirked, a hint of undisguised disdain in her eyes. Veronica! Accompanied by a somewhat husky call, the old king sitting opposite the door, lifted the scepter adorned with ruby next to him, pointed to the empty chair opposite the middle-aged pair, and said with an undeniable tone, "Come and sit down, and tell me about today's events." "All right." Glancing at the queen and the Minister of Finance in the side hall, the princess inwardly sighed, then slowly stepped into the reception room, sitting at the seat designated by the old king. This afternoon, According to the predetermined schedule, I went to the Prime Minister's residence to discuss the expansion of suffrage. But as the meeting was about to end, over 300 officers of the rank of school and lieutenant were incited by a secret hand to block me at the Prime Minister's residence. When mentioning the secret hand, the princess intentionally slowed her pace, casting a significant glance at the middle-aged couple opposite, then turned back to the old king on the main seat. To gather so many military officers at once requires not only a significant background and connections but also considerable time. Counting travel takes at least a week. Although the decision to implement the officer replacement decree has recently been known to many, a week ago, I had only mentioned it to you. So can you tell me who else learned of this from you? Upon the princess's inquiry, the queen opposite was slightly startled, then grasped the armchair's handle with some irritation. What are you? Apologies. The message may have leaked from me. Grabbing the sleeve of the queen and pulling back her impending queries, the gracious Minister of Finance sighed. Upon learning Princess Veronica was preparing to implement the replacement decree, I immediately issued an internal letter demanding the finance department prepare accordingly, clear up owed officers' salaries in advance to match the princess's actions. But even with my repeated emphasis that the letter must remain internal and cannot be sent out, the ministry has been extremely busy lately with coordinating the princess's tax reduction policy, leading to someone violating the rules and taking the letter home. Though there's no evidence yet, I personally suspect the letter was seen by family members of officials who privately informed friendly nobles, causing the affair to leak. At this point, the Minister of Finance stood up from his chair, slightly bowing towards the princess opposite with an apologetic expression. I'm sorry, Princess Veronica, it's mostly due to my mismanagement, leading to the information leaking early, causing you to be blocked by officers, even injured by stones. I am willing to take full responsibility for this. Possibly it was your leak, though there's no evidence yet, mostly due to your mismanagement. Your apology is indeed precisely crafted. Faced with the Minister of Finance's sincere apology, Princess Veronica did not rise to accept, but instead turned her gaze to the old king on the main seat, her bright eyes filled with undisguisable irony and a deeply hidden expectation. Veronica! Calling the princess's name, the old king, whose complexion was wan, appearance aged, and sat in a wheelchair yet with his back held straight, forcefully thumped the scepter in his hand, speaking wearily. It was an unintended error. Don't place too much weight on it. Moreover, you only suffered a bruise to your arm. A few days' rest and it will be fine. Let's leave it at that. An unintended error? Only bruised your arm? Rest a few days and it's fine? Upon the old king's words, the princess couldn't help but lower her head and glance at her arm. Though Leon had healed her arm wound, the dark brown bloodstain nevertheless soaked from the elbow down to the wrist. Furthermore, her father hadn't even noticed that although her arm was injured, her clothing remained smooth without bulging from bandaging. On second thought, it makes sense. Since entering, he hadn't looked at her arm in the slightest, of course. He wouldn't discover such a small anomaly. Fine, then let's leave it be. With a self-deprecating smile, the princess slightly closed her eyes, then refrained from looking at the old king, instead focusing on the middle-aged couple opposite, calmly questioning. And then, you two coming to the palace late at night wouldn't be merely to show concern for my injuries, right? What kind of attitude is this? Perhaps the queen, with high cheekbones and a stern demeanor, was irritated by the mocking look in the princess's eyes. She forcefully slapped the armrest of her chair and angrily rebuked. If it weren't for your insistence on imposing a tax reduction, would your uncle's Ministry of Finance be in turmoil? News leaked. You were trapped in the Prime Minister's residence. That's your own fault. And forcing the replacement of officers is one thing, but adding people from the royal family and your uncle to the list, what exactly are you trying to do? What am I trying to do? Looking at the queen full of anger and listening to her harsh reprimands, the princess inexplicably found it somewhat amusing instead of feeling the expected surge of fury. Though the queen was nominally her mother and they lived in the same palace, she had never been on the same side as her. In terms of distance, the faraway Leon, residing several streets over, felt closer to her. Ah, it's rather funny. In this magnificent palace where I grew up, I lived through nightmares for 6 whole years, enduring countless nights without sleep. Yet, in that modest apartment on Bridge Street, I could sleep soundly until the sun was high, amidst some absurdly wonderful dreams. Even more laughable is that when I injured my arm with a stone, the only one who cared about my injury was Leon, who wanted to call off the engagement, while upon returning to my real home, no one even gave a glance to the bloodstains on my sleeve. Veronica! Noticing that the princess opposite was somewhat distracted, with a slight upward curve of her mouth as if she wasn't listening, the stern-faced woman became even more furious. What are you laughing at? Nothing. I just thought of something happy. I am, after all, your nominal mother, and this is your attitude towards me. Casually responding, unwilling to indulge the queen's tantrum, Princess Veronica turned to the Minister of Finance, calmly saying, Your Excellency Minister, the day after tomorrow is when the parliamentary meeting of both houses will be held. I've been very busy recently, so if future exchanges continue in this tantrum-throwing manner, I ask you to forgive me for not accompanying you. What are you? Shut up. Shushing the enraged queen, the old king in his wheelchair coughed for a while, then raised his scepter, pointing at the finance minister, sitting formally with his eyes observing his nose observing his heart, with a hoarse and indistinct voice. You speak. As you command. The finance minister nodded slightly towards the old king, then looked up at the princess opposite, speaking with a gentle demeanor. Your Highness Veronica, my late-night visit this time is chiefly to discuss 2 matters with you. Firstly, though the root cause of today's incidents may lie with me, your replacement decree indeed has parts that were inappropriate themselves. Otherwise it wouldn't have escalated this far. I believe you have neglected some considerations in certain measures. Is that so? Upon hearing this, the princess looked at him calmly and said, What omissions are there in the replacement decree I implemented? I hope your excellency can advise me. You're too kind, your highness. With a slight nod of courtesy, the finance minister began. Firstly, it is about the scope of the replacement targets. Though your highness had noble intentions in reorganizing the military, it was somewhat too hastily executed. There's no need to include all officers in the replacement evaluation at once. A family background of earl or higher officers can be assessed more gradually. Additionally, the evaluation criteria are excessively strict. Some officers, even though they haven't reached the standards prescribed by the military manual, have ample experience and demonstrable loyalty to the royal family, and thus warrant exceptions. Finally, many officers hail from families with past merits. If entire replacements occur just because they didn't meet evaluation standards, it would undeservedly treat them poorly. In fact, several have come to me complaining, and I sympathize with their situation. Therefore, I hope your highness would reconsider. Why not say it more straightforwardly, your excellency? After hearing the so-called suggestions from the finance minister, Princess Veronica chuckled lightly, then subtly mocking, summarized. Don't touch the ones with a significant background, don't touch those willing to support the royal family, don't touch those who might feed benefits to you. Is my summary accurate, your excellency? The meaning is somewhat similar, but your highness's wording isn't quite right. The finance minister laughed. If I were to summarize, it should be those affecting kingdom stability, willing to act as aides to the royal family, and wishing to stand with us. These 3 types of officers might have slightly inferior capabilities, but stirring them up would be troublesome beyond yield, or they could become allies. So please ponder carefully. Ponder. Is there any need for it? Glancing at the smiling finance minister opposite and then at the expressionless king, the princess took a deep breath, feeling utterly weighed down as though she hadn't slept for 3 nights. Not to mention whether this universally compromising replacement decree can achieve the anticipated effect. Just the policy changes themselves are already a catastrophic blow to her credibility. If, after being troubled once by the officers, she immediately compromises by altering policies, it will certainly make any future legislation attempts immensely obstructed, essentially having the reform before it even starts. I believe there's nothing to ponder. Instantly seeing through the insidious intentions behind the finance minister's proposal, the princess resolutely refused. Your Excellency, you might think amassing more power is a good thing, but if the military continues to deteriorate this way, the national defense war 6 years ago will inevitably replay one day. This matter has no room for compromise. You may speak of the second matter. All right. Being rebuked by the princess, the finance minister was unperturbed and, with a calm nod, continued. The second issue I'd like to discuss with you is about the parliamentary meeting the day after tomorrow. The incident today where officers besieged the Prime Minister's residence indicates their standpoint. If you attend the parliament and insist on pursuing the replacement decree, it might exacerbate conflict. Hence, I believe you shouldn't attend the parliamentary meeting the day after tomorrow. Upon hearing the finance minister's words, Princess Veronica's pupils slightly constricted, and she coldly retorted, "What do you mean?" "I mean perhaps Prince Joshua could attend in your stead." The finance minister smiled. "Prince Joshua is your brother, equally qualified to represent the royal family. Though he may be somewhat inexperienced, a bit lacking in expertise, with my assistance, he should be able to manage." "Absolutely not." Never expecting the finance minister to come up with such an idea, the princess couldn't help but feel a mix of shock and anger, standing up to argue. "Joshua is incapable." This time, aside from the replacement decree, there are proposals for expanding suffrage, support for the energy sector, and a series of— "You needn't worry about those." Interrupting the princess, the finance minister smiled warmly. "I've already sent someone to fetch the relevant documents from your bedroom. With the preliminary preparations you've made, alongside my assistance, Prince Joshua will undoubtedly control the situation smoothly and advance these proposals." "Have you already gone to my bedroom to get the documents?" Upon hearing the Chancellor of the Exchequer's words, the princess, who was just moments ago both shocked and angry, gradually calmed down and turned her gaze to the old king seated at the main position. If modifying the succession decree or even hoping Joshua would replace her might be something the Queen and the Chancellor of the Exchequer decided on their own, then ordering someone directly to her bedroom to retrieve the proposal document must have been done with her father's tacit approval. No, possibly more than just tacit approval. Looking at the old king sitting in the wheelchair directly under the crystal chandelier, with half his face hidden in the shadows, Princess Veronica took a deep breath, then sat back in her chair and asked calmly, "Father, is this your intention?" "Yes." After the slightly lax eyelids opened and closed, the old king, whose face was emaciated to an unbecoming degree compared to the photos in the princess's bedroom, with only the tear troughs still faintly recognizable, replied in a faint voice, "I have already arranged this matter for you. In 3 days, Joshua will return from the Kingdom of Morna and take over for you in attending the Upper House Parliament meeting. You are at the age to marry. These affairs will eventually need to be handed over to Joshua. Rather than wait until you marry into the Kingdom of Hyzen and then have Joshua take over, it would be better to let him start getting more exposure now. Until I marry into the Kingdom of Hyzen." Upon hearing this, the princess pursed her lips, staring expressionlessly at the increasingly unfamiliar father, and asked, "What about Leon? The engagement between him and me?" "There is no need to fulfill that kind of engagement." The old king interrupted the princess with a forceful thump on the floor, his prominent jointed hand gripping the scepter. Despite his illness having left him thin and weak, his glare remained intense and menacing as he rasped, "The valuable aspects of the Ryan family are no more than the positions in the Ministry of War and the Department of Transportation. Over this past month, you have consolidated most of the Ryan family's inheritance. The parts you cannot consolidate can be treated coldly for the time being, and gradually replaced with our own people later, except for that deputy speaker seat of the upper house and some properties that cannot be easily liquidated in the short term. The Ryan family serves no purpose. It's not worth using your marriage to win them over. The lame Grand Duke of the Kingdom of Hyzen is indeed your destination." "You know he is the lame Grand Duke?" Looking at her father, who planned her future without any emotional fluctuation, the princess smirked with a hint of sarcasm and said, "Never mind that he's nearly 20 years older than I am. Even the pirates of the Kingdom of Sao have heard of the infamous reputation of that lame Grand Duke, temperamental and ominous. Are you sure such a person will be my destination?" After hearing the princess's words, the old king fell silent for a while, then slightly bowed his head, avoiding her gaze. "As a princess, you should repay what you've enjoyed from the kingdom. You are indeed correct." Princess Veronica nodded with indifference in her eyes and said, "This is what you've taught me since childhood. I've always remembered it and have been doing it all along. But have you done it, father?" Hearing this, the old king frowned slightly and asked blankly, "Veronica, what are you trying to say?" "What I mean is, you're a terrible king, truly a disappointment to this country." Upon hearing the princess's words, the expression of the Chancellor of the Exchequer sitting opposite turned involuntarily pale, and the Queen opened her mouth in shock, nearly falling from her chair. As if shedding an incredibly heavy burden, the princess let out a long sigh, then calmly said to the old king, "To be honest, I initially wanted to speak to you with many arguments. For example, it's not the royal family that supports me, but those ordinary people who toil day and night, and I should repay them. For instance, although you value the royal family more, when the kingdom decays, the royal family will sooner or later cease to exist. Or that whether the royal family controls absolute power is not so important. As long as we can make the kingdom stronger, or even just give everyone a glimmer of hope, you can achieve what you want." Under the gaze of the old king, Princess Veronica smiled, yet her expression carried some helplessness as she said, "But after thinking it over, I decided not to speak. Since Mother's death, your heart has been completely filled by the royal family and the throne, with nothing else able to fit, not even me as your daughter. No matter what I say, it won't change your decision, will it?" "Are you done?" The old king, whose bright eyes seemed incompatible with his sickly body, stared unblinkingly at the princess and said calmly, "If you are done venting, write a letter to the Duke of Lionheart, telling him that you aren't feeling well and cannot attend the bicameral parliament in 2 days, and ask him, out of regard for you, to use his position as deputy speaker in the upper house to assist Joshua. He, you really haven't changed. You always want to squeeze every bit of value out of anything you can use." After sarcastically mocking him face to face, the princess said with indifference, "If I'm not mistaken, the person who went to my bedroom to fetch the proposal documents should have already seized my seal and even found someone who can imitate my handwriting. So even if I refuse to help, this letter will still be sent, right?" "Yes." After a simple acknowledgement, the old king, half of whose body was shrouded in shadow, asked, "So will you write it yourself, or do you want me to find someone to help you?" "Since the result is the same, I might as well write it myself." After saying this, the princess turned around, looked at the queen opposite her who was full of joy, and slightly curled her lips as she spoke. "Congratulations. With Leon's great help, Joshua's experience representing the royal family at the bicameral parliament this time will definitely be quite unforgettable." 3 days later at 5 in the morning, in the uptown area of the capital city, outside the Parliament Hall in Zeihausen Palace. Before the sun had a chance to rise in the sky, the neighs of horses and the roar of boilers tore apart the night, and numerous exquisite and lavish steam carriages filed through a specially created expressway, parking in the open space outside the building. Following closely, one after another, members of Parliament wearing robes and top hats, with coronet crests on their chest, stepped down from the carriages. They tipped their hats to acquaintances, then gathered in small groups to enter the main hall, waiting for the commencement of the upper house parliament. As the kingdom's most important overt power organ, the bicameral parliament did not convene at the same time. The upper house parliament met relatively earlier and normally included members of the royal family, even having an annual opening ceremony where reigning kings or queens delivered a throne speech. However, with the old king growing more grievously ill and immobile, he refused to attend the opening ceremony for 3 consecutive years, and the associated cumbersome rituals were temporarily suspended, replaced by a brief speech given by a royal family member. "Almost everyone is here." After pushing aside the curtain hanging in front of the seats and checking the attendees within the venue, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, dressed in a dark gray robe, nodded with satisfaction and then turned to the freckled prince beside him in splendid attire, smiling as he asked, "It's your first time participating in the bicameral parliament, and you have to perform the throne speech representing the royal family. Are you feeling nervous?" "A little." After adjusting the somewhat tight collar, Joshua looked through the gap in the curtain at the main hall where nearly 1,000 people were seated. He then said uneasily, "I see many of Veronica's people outside. Without her presence today, will they cooperate with me?" "Hee. There's no need to worry about that. They are Veronica's people but also members of the royal family, so they are naturally expected to follow your will." After comforting his nephew, the Chancellor of the Exchequer smiled and said, "Moreover, your mother and I have even prepared a helper for you in advance. If anything goes awry, he will help you manage the situation." "That's reassuring." Relieved by the Chancellor of the Exchequer's words, the freckled prince curiously asked, "Uncle, who is this helper that you and mother arranged for me?" "It's the Deputy Speaker of the Upper House, the current Duke of Lionheart." "Oh, it's the Duke of... Who? Who did you arrange for me?" After hearing about the so-called assistant's identity, Joshua felt a sudden tingling at the scalp, even experiencing a strange phantom pain on his face. If one were to find the person Prince Freckles feared most in the entire kingdom, no one would dare claim the first place if his cheap brother-in-law declared himself the second. After all, even if he committed some absurdities that angered the old king, at most he'd be scolded and put in detention for a few days. If there was a plea from the queen, even the detention might be waived. But if he pissed off that cheap brother-in-law, he really would get slapped hard enough to faint, and even be slapped awake again, treated for his injuries, and then slapped until that man's anger subsided. What's more despairing is that after being slapped, the other party wouldn't face any punishment whatsoever. Touching his face, which had been slapped several times, Joshua couldn't help but feel a deep sense of helplessness in his eyes. The royal family needed to leverage the duke's status from the Ryan family to accept their political inheritance, so they wouldn't pursue the offense of assaulting a prince, preferring to let things be. When he reported to the cleanup bureau, demanding they control this madman, the response was that it had nothing to do with them. Those fools even thought, considering the relationship between that ruffian and Veronica, this was a royal domestic affair. As long as he didn't use an abnormal object to harm him, it wasn't considered a violation of the cleanup bureau's rules. Thus, as a prince being brutally slapped in his own kingdom, he found nowhere to voice his grievances. Where's the logic in that? "Uncle, why would you think of asking for his help?" Peeping through the gap in the curtains and seeing a familiar figure at the deputy speaker's seat, Prince Freckles instinctively shrunk his neck, then turned back and complained, "That man is a lunatic. He doesn't consider the occasion when pushed. Couldn't you discuss with me before finding help? You only returned from the kingdom of Morna last night. How could I discuss it with you? And watch your posture." Seeing his nephew's face showing fear, the finance minister frowned slightly, scolding with a slightly displeased expression. "Stand straight. Hold your back up. You are the kingdom's only prince. You will inherit the throne and become the next king. What are you afraid of?" I'm not afraid of him, but with so many people outside, what if he comes over later and hits me?" "Why would he hit you?" "In the past, though he did hit you, that was when the Ryan family was still useful and had Veronica backing him, so he dared to be so reckless. Now Veronica is confined to her bedroom, the Ryan family's value almost drained, and he's nothing but an empty shell of a duke. If he truly goes mad and dares to lay a hand on you in front of so many people, then hit back. If you can't beat him, call the guards. Just because the royal family didn't touch him before doesn't mean they can't now. What's there to fear? Perhaps, that's right." After hearing his uncle's words, Joshua's eyes couldn't help but brighten. Yes, things are different now. The kingdom can fully hold him accountable for his crimes. Without his backing, no matter how arrogant he is, he wouldn't dare hit me in front of so many people, right? With confidence from the finance minister's words, Prince Freckles couldn't help but straighten his spine, lifting his head with pride, glaring fiercely in Leon's direction through the curtain in front of him. "Damn mutt. Let's see how arrogant you can be this time." Without Veronica to back you, you're just a hiss. Meeting Leon's eyes through the curtain's gap, Joshua instinctively inhaled sharply. Though Leon seated there showed no extra expression. Those eyes were staring at him unblinkingly through the curtain. Noticing Joshua's gaze, Leon's lips even curled slightly, revealing a rather gratified expression. What are you gratified about? Tell me, what's there to be gratified about at a time like this? All right, it's about time. Just as Joshua widened his eyes, instinctively feeling something was off, the finance minister took out a pocket watch and glanced at it, then urged, "Go out. It's your turn to take the stage and deliver the Regency speech. Uncle, I feel. Get out there quickly. Whatever you have to say it afterwards." Despite feeling something wasn't quite right, as the attendant lifted the curtain in front of him, Prince Freckles had no choice but to brace himself under that gratified gaze, stepping out of the waiting area to ascend to the main platform prepared for the Regency speech, and began reciting the pre-prepared speech. I, first Prince Joshua, appointed by the kingdom's current king, on behalf of the king and the entire royal family, attend this upper house council meeting. Somewhat awkwardly reading the convoluted introduction, Joshua, whose scalp tingled from someone else's gratified gaze, lowered his head, staring intently at the speech, and raised his right hand to swear. I will replace the current king and promise the attending council members and all citizens of the kingdom that this upper house council meeting will abide by the kingdom's codes and council rules. Adhere to, maintain, rush through as if being chased by a flood of beasts. Speaking so fast it was somewhat chaotic, Joshua, under the finance minister's disapproving gaze, turned his head slightly embarrassed and said, I conclude my declaration here. The speaker shall now preside over the council and read all the proposals. Having hastily fulfilled his duties, Prince Freckles slightly relaxed his tense expression, hurriedly laid down the speech and quickly climbed onto the golden throne at the back of the main platform, cautiously sat on the edge, and vigilantly watched the deputy speaker's seat. As the Regency speech concluded and the prince representing the royal family took his seat on the throne at the back of the main platform, the entire hall, with over 100 attending counselors and more than 800 observing counselors, nearly 1,000 pairs of eyes, all gazed in unison at the speaker's seat. Very good. Now I don't need to fear the princess hesitating. You all picked this peach at just the right time. After smiling at Joshua, who sat on the throne looking puzzled, and giving him an encouraging look, Leon rose from the speaker's seat, ascended the main platform on a path lined with a red carpet. Subsequently, 2 guards moved a single-person podium for the speaker onto the platform, and Leon stood at the podium with his back to Joshua, picked up the small silver hammer placed on the podium, and struck the golden clock beside the podium forcefully. I announce, glancing at the counselors seated on the red seats on either side below, Leon declared with a smile, the upper house council meeting officially begins. It's okay. Everything has gone smoothly so far. Watching Leon, who took up the motion on the single podium and began reading it with a smile, the Chancellor of the Exchequer couldn't help but breathe a slight sigh of relief, revealing a satisfied smile on his face. Even though he had repeatedly assured Joshua not to worry, in his heart, the Chancellor of the Exchequer was clearly not as confident in the great noble on stage, who was known for being reckless and the most unnoble in demeanor. After all, the other party was the acting president of the upper house and nominally the leader of the old nobility, whose support for bills that carve up the old nobility was too significant to replace with anyone else. Otherwise, he would never have chosen to take such a risk. And now, although the mood of the Duke of Lionheart on stage was inexplicably good, as long as he showed a willingness to cooperate, this session of the upper house was already 99% successful, with no more issues to worry about. Under the confident, assured gaze of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Leon, on stage, picked up a small silver hammer, tapped it twice on the golden bell, and then said beamingly, Ladies and gentlemen, according to the agenda, next up is the opening debate session. The main topic of this parliament is the evaluation of the reform measures that the kingdom has undertaken in recent years, and the assessment of Princess Veronica's reforms. May I ask, Are there any members present who think Princess Veronica's reforms have failed? There are. No sooner had Leon spoken than a dressed elder in the front row jumped up impatiently and said with resentment in his eyes, I said last year that Princess Veronica's reforms are utterly absurd. The foundation of the kingdom is the nobility. The regulations she implements are consistently aimed at suppressing the nobility. Her reforms are complete nonsense. Nodding in acknowledgement, Leon took out a charcoal pencil and a notebook, placed them on the single podium, and then narrowed his eyes to glance at the nameplate in front of the dressed elder's seat. Earl Evans, written down. After jotting down the dressed elder in his notebook, Leon continued to look around the room and asked with a pleasant smile, Does anyone else share similar views? My opinion is the same as Earl Evans. A brawny middle-aged nobleman, probably in his 40s or so, stood up, also with an angry face, and said, Princess Veronica claims to support commerce and industry, but she places severe restrictions on us. Many projects directly refuse noble participation, and she even imposes heavy taxes instead. This is a betrayal of the kingdom's code. Marquis Mori, written down. Is there anyone else? Yes, I also think Lord Mori makes sense. Another middle-aged woman stood up and said, I have always respected Princess Veronica immensely, but I cannot agree with her biased behavior. Her measures are tantamount to undermining the kingdom's foundation. In the long run, the nation will not be a nation. Quite imposing. After scribbling down the name of the middle-aged woman, Leon, in a great mood, continued to ask with a smile, Does anyone else have similar opinions? There indeed are, but what exactly are you plotting? Among the more than 100 attending members present, half had quite a number of grumblings about the princess's reforms. However, faced with Leon's pleasant questioning, no one else stood up for a moment, all of them looking at Leon on the main stage with uncertainty. According to the usual opening debate process, after one side speaks, the presiding president should ask if there are any members with opposing views and give both parties time to state their opinions. Yet this junior acting president only selected the side opposing the princess to ask, then wrote down a couple of notes when someone stood up, and another couple when another stood up. Considering the other party's betrothal to Princess Veronica, if this isn't blacklisting for future retaliation, I'll eat the table in front of me. Just 3 against, is it? After scanning around the stage, Leon nodded with satisfaction, then picked up the small silver hammer and knocked once on the golden bell beside him, announcing with a smile, Since it's 165-3, there's no need to continue the debate. The opening debate session is over, and next is the review proposal session. Oh? Isn't this? Can you even do that? Faced with the acting president's not just careless, but outright nonsensical actions, the members couldn't hold in their reactions anymore. The first to oppose the princess, Earl Evans, immediately slammed the table and pointed angrily at Leon on the stage. You should bow to me up. Leon, who had beforehand put on the migratory thrush prince badge, moved his lips swiftly, passing this silent message over before Earl Evans could completely stand up. Immediately, the dressed elder who had slammed the table suddenly snapped his knees straight, thrusting his rear sharply backward, and bent down in terror, performing a 90-degree bow toward Leon. In the bewildered stares of the gathered members, Earl Evans suddenly and inexplicably knocked his head against the table in front of him and fainted without uttering a sound. Earl Evans has died of shame. Seeing the old Earl suddenly headbutt the table, Leon on the main stage was shocked and quickly shouted for help. Guards! Guards! Come help! Hurry! But really, at his age, how could he still be so fiery? If you can't debate, then just don't debate. Why get so worked up over it? Thanks to the acting president's timely call for help, fortunately, old Earl Evans had only fainted without serious harm. But the impact was quite harsh, shattering the solid wood table, and when the old Earl came to, he saw double when looking at people and staggered like he was stepping on butterflies. Even with 2 guards supporting him on each side, his feet kept tracing an S-line. He wasn't seriously hurt, but certainly couldn't participate in the parliament anymore. Sigh. Why do this to yourself? Watching the old Earl being carried away, surrounded by murmuring members, the acting president sighed and shook his head, once again picking up the hammer and tapping the small bell beside him. Ladies and gentlemen, though Earl Evans is no longer with us, the upper house session cannot be halted, so let us continue to the next phase. I have the proposals you submitted in advance here, and on the desks in front of you are summaries of their main content. Next, I will read out the names of these proposals in turn, while you are responsible for voting to decide whether each proposal can pass. First, we have a proposal from the military department regarding personnel adjustments. It's happening. At Leon's words, both the Chancellor of the Exchequer seated at the side of the main stage and Joshua on the throne behind Leon suddenly straightened up with anticipation. Veronica has almost arranged everything, and this officer replacement order should pass smoothly. And once the officer replacement order passes under the presidency of Prince Joshua, it equates to retrieving the sweetest of all fruits, securing Joshua's position unshakably. The most critical moment has arrived. Not only the Minister of Finance and Joshua were on edge when Leon mentioned the personnel adjustment proposal sent by the military. Everyone in the large main hall who knew about how, 3 days ago, the princess was blocked by a large number of officers at the Prime Minister's residence held their breath. Regarding Princess Veronica's reforms in recent years, although they have put the old nobility at a disadvantage, most of them can only be considered as indirect hits and minor skirmishes, not really damaging the roots. But this time's officer replacement order is different. This proposal, although it does not directly uproot or deny the legality of noble status, if passed, it would be like kicking the old nobility in the knee, leaving them to hobble on one leg and significantly lose their voice before the royal family. According to the legislative process in the kingdom's bicameral parliament, the upper house has a very high weight in legislation. If this proposal is passed in the upper house, then the lower house can only make detailed revisions, no matter how much they delay. It will get implemented bit by bit without any room for maneuver. Therefore, what the acting speaker is about to say next almost determines the future of the old noble groups and even the entire kingdom. It is the most important proposal in nearly 100 years of the kingdom, perhaps with nothing comparable. Haha! It seems everyone knows what I'm going to say next. Under the gaze of nearly 1,000 pairs of eyes, some tense, some expectant, some anxious, and some excited, Leon first looked around the main hall, then slightly curled his lips and suddenly raised his voice. Today, the first proposal that requires a vote from all members is the military's gate guard abolition order. Those opposing it can speak. I oppose. Just as Leon's words were halfway through, the middle-aged man who had recently stood up second to denounce the princess's reforms as a betrayal of the kingdom's laws stood up abruptly. His face flushed red and roared. This is absolute madness. The military's gate guard must not be. Gate guard. Yes, the gate guard. Leon on the main stage nodded, smiling as he replied. The first proposal requiring a vote from all of you is the proposal to abolish the military's gate guard bureau. The Minister of Defense believes that the military has enough officers and patrol guards, and there's no need to establish a separate gate guard bureau, intending to abolish it to save costs. Is there anyone else like Lord Morton who opposes the military's gate guard abolition? Isn't the vote for the officer replacement order? Hearing the acting speaker's words, the members in the main hall were all stunned, then hurriedly started flipping through the proposal forms on their desks. Sure enough, among the thick pile of proposals marked with military insignia, there was indeed a page, or a sixth of a page mentioning this gate guard abolition order. However, because the matter is so trivial, so small that it doesn't deserve an entire page, it was mixed into the other miscellaneous section with just 2 lines, leading most to not even remember it. But thinking carefully, this trivial gate guard abolition order does count as a personnel adjustment proposal submitted by the military, so the acting speaker wasn't lying. Just that. Peft. Seeing Lord Morton, who was about to lead the charge against the officer replacement order, standing up from his seat, fully prepared and filled with anger but ending up with a blank face, a muffled laugh resounded from the sidelines of the main stage. Those who had a grudge against Lord Morton and the adjunct members who only had the right to listen in burst into laughter, filling the entire hall with an atmosphere of amusement. No one else expressing opinions? It seems that only Lord Morton sees the military's gate guard as critical and opposed to its abolition. After the members laughed enough, Leon picked up a small silver hammer on the main stage, struck a small golden bell with a clang, and said with a grin, 167 to 1, the proposal to abolish the military's Gate Guard Bureau is passed. This proposal will be sent to the lower house later for detailed amendments and execution. Lord Morton, please sit down. Fooled. In the laughter around him, whether restrained or wanton, the middle-aged member's face, already red from tension, flushed 2 shades darker, almost purple. Once Lord Morton's face was as red as a pig's liver. Leon nodded to the members before, under Lord Morton's deadly gaze, smilingly saying, I'm sorry, I just played a little joke with all of you. Now let's get to the main topic. Saying this, Leon's expression slightly solemn. Then he hit the small golden bell with a hammer, sincerely stating, Next, the one that requires your voting is the most important among the military-submitted proposals this time. Whether the replacement can proceed this time determines the military's and even the entire kingdom's future, deciding if many officers can still wear their original outfits. It seems that this time it is the officer replacement order for real. Seeing Leon's incredibly solemn expression, the members also became serious, sitting upright waiting to vote. I declare, sardonically glancing at Lord Morton sitting to his right, who looked ready to bounce up any second, Leon loudly announced under countless stares. Today, the second proposal under review is the Military Officer Uniform Replacement Order. Please vote. Hearing the keywords military, officer, and replacement order, Lord Morton, who had just failed to charge and metaphorically crashed into a ditch, stood up with a start and then plopped back into his seat with a thud. Ah ha ha ha. Although Lord Morton's reaction was much quicker this time as he sat back down without saying anything, still, although he said nothing, he also seemed to have said everything. Facing the same trick twice, with Lord Morton bouncing in his chair like a spring, even those on his side couldn't help but laugh. Mr. Speaker. After biting down on his cheek to hold back a smile, the Minister of Finance standing at the side of the main stage stood up, seriously requesting. One joke is enough. Today's schedule is exceptionally tight, so please set aside these unimportant issues and handle the more crucial proposals first. Leon responded perfunctorily, picked up the hammer, knocked the small bell, and cheerfully said to the members below, Then let's proceed to the third vote. This time we will vote on another proposal submitted by the military. This proposal still affects many officers, deciding whether they can still have the same cup of rice to eat, and like the previous 2 proposals, it has a profound impact on the kingdom's future. Understood, another trick on us. Hearing this familiarly vague description, the members below naturally wouldn't be fooled a third time, and they started flipping through the files at hand. Sure enough, 3 lines under the Gate Guard abolition proposal was the meal budget expansion proposal, with the description matching exactly 100% still nonsense. As the saying goes, once or twice but not thrice or fourth. Facing this practically blatant riddle, even the most impatient Lord Morton didn't bother any longer. Instead, crossing his arms and gloomily watching Leon on stage, ready for more nonsense. However, Officer Replacement Order, please vote. 876543321. Taking just 0.35 seconds to count down, Leon, amidst the baffled expressions of the members, slammed down the little golden bell next to him. No opposition. Officer Replacement Order passed.
No.
Why did you suddenly get serious? Facing Leon's haphazard hammering, the onlooking Parliament members were initially stunned, then suddenly furious. Previously, it was just joking and fooling around, which was fine, because it wasn't them being embarrassed. Everyone could have a laugh, and there's no need to confront you, the acting vice speaker. But now, it's about the interests of half the people present. The officer replacement order is of unparalleled importance, and you dare try to settle it in such a ridiculous way? This is simply absurd. Having been fooled twice, Marquis Morley slammed the desk in front of him, stood up for the third time, pointed at Leon's nose, and shouted angrily, "This is the Senate, not a place for your monkey business. You're not fit to be vice speaker. Get down from there." Yes. Seeing someone taking the lead, the rest of the noble members whose interests were harmed by the officer replacement order also stood up, accusing, "How can a sacred place like the Senate allow such nonsense? Get down. In my view, let's propose a temporary motion to cancel the Ryan family's vice speaker seat. Yes. Also, the officer replacement order must be re-voted on. We don't recognize proposals passed in such a manner. Step down. Step down. This is bad." Seeing the furious crowd below the stage, the finance minister at the side of the main platform couldn't help but widen his eyes, almost wanting to rush up and strangle Leon to death. Out of the 168 parliament members present, nearly 40% had already sided with the royal family, and another 20% were persuaded by Veronica. If the proposal were submitted normally, it would pass the initial review 100%. Then Joshua would stand up according to his arrangement, forcefully representing the royal family, suppress some first and then woo some, achieving 2/3 approval to solidify the replacement order. Attending this Senate meeting and being the main force pushing the replacement order, Joshua could also take a part of Veronica's people, boost his own prestige, and successfully swallow the biggest benefits. In the end, this matter that could have been a surefire success, this damn Duke of Lionheart insisted on doing something sketchy. Now the opposition members were angry, causing a ruckus, while those supporting Joshua and him were in a bad position to speak up. If Leon, the acting vice speaker, were to be ousted, leading to a revote, the originally solid matter could be in jeopardy. Incapable and a nuisance. Having mentally labeled the fumbling Leon on stage, the finance minister glanced at the helpless Joshua on his throne and sighed inwardly. He's still an inexperienced child, facing such uproarious scenes. He must have panicked inside. It seems Joshua can't stabilize the situation. It's up to me. Everyone, please calm down. Please listen to me. The finance minister rose from his seat, loudly trying to dissuade the crowd. The most important thing now is for the Senate to function normally. Everyone, please quiet down. Although the finance minister had considerable prestige, apparently being fooled by Leon was severe. All members' emotions were peculiarly high, their faces flushed, scolding him for profaning the Senate's sacred atmosphere. Already prone to anger and losing face twice in a row, Marquis Morley directly began to scream insults, while the finance minister's loud attempts to dissuade were thoroughly overwhelmed by curses. After trying desperately to shout twice and realizing his voice was masked, the finance minister was getting anxious, and Leon on stage seemed to notice him, beckoning him hurriedly to come up, even picking up the fallen gold bell and bending over to retrieve the silver hammer from the floor. Right, there's the bell. Seeing Leon's actions, the frantic finance minister suddenly realized that when emotions are this high, the only way to drown out the curses is with louder noise, and the gold bell on stage is undoubtedly the best solution. Having realized the only solution, the finance minister was overjoyed, forgoing the stairs to the main platform and directly scrambling up, grabbing the silver hammer from Leon's hand, readying to strike the bell to calm the situation. However, at this moment, Marquis Morley's eyes flashed red with rage, feeling an even greater fury toward Leon on stage. Unable to contain his anger, he suddenly pulled off his thick leather shoe underfoot, shouted, and hurled it full force at Leon on stage. Though the throw was somewhat off, Leon on stage seemed startled, retreated 2 steps, dodging upwards with the silver hammer, causing the finance minister reaching for the hammer to lean forward, raising his head. Thunk! A muffled sound that drowned out the curses filled the hall as Marquis Morley's hefty leather shoe, made with rawhide and weighted with wooden inserts and metal tips, roughly 2 to 3 pounds, smacked firmly into the finance minister's nape, knocking him to the ground. Leon, startled, instinctively dodged backward, avoiding the finance minister's flailing grasp but failed to avoid the lectern beside him, which the finance minister seized and pulled downwards, crashing onto Leon. What happened? How did the finance minister fall? I don't know. Didn't see it clearly. It seemed like something was thrown over. Then he went down. Facing this unexpected scene, all the parliament members below, including Marquis Morley, the culprit in this sudden rage, were dumbfounded, while Leon on stage didn't pause, sighing somewhat helplessly. Can't believe it didn't knock him out. My luck is really something, but it doesn't matter anymore. In Joshua's unbelievably shocked expression, Leon's right foot, blocked by the lectern, suddenly swung with force, kicking directly at the finance minister's forehead. After suffering this kick, with his head repeatedly struck, the finance minister finally fell unconscious with a shoe print on his forehead. Leon, having completed the finishing blow, pointed angrily at the bewildered Marquis Morley below and shouted loudly, "Guards! Guards!
No.
I'm not. I didn't." Hearing Leon's words, Marquis Morley was suddenly startled, finally breaking free from the uncontrollable rage. However, startled by the sudden situation and following the vice speaker's orders, the guards had already pounced on him, aggressively stacking on top of him, painfully suppressing him, while Leon on stage conveniently cried out, "Minister! Minister! Minister, wake up!" Dragging the kicked unconscious finance minister from under the lectern and wiping the shoe dust from his face, Leon, having tidied up the mess, tossed the finance minister back to the ground, then furiously pounded the lectern before him. Eyes filled with indignation, he shouted at the crowd, "Look at what you've done. This is a sacred Senate, not a street market. What have you turned this place into? What have we turned this place into?" Upon hearing Leon's inquiry, the members of Parliament, stunned by the assassination of the finance minister, snapped back to reality, their anger surging instantly. "What do you mean by what have we turned this place into? Weren't you the one talking nonsense first? Do you have the nerve to say this? Oh damn, this is really not cooperative." Seeing the members of Parliament below cursing once again, Leon's cheek couldn't help twitching. He quickly brushed his cuff, pushing back a small protruding piece of goat horn. "The finance minister has already fainted. Why are you still provoking their anger? Hurry up and stop it." As the black goat was sent back to the mirror world, halting the effect of the war cornerstone, the fiery anger in the members' hearts was slightly suppressed, and Leon picked up the small silver hammer and started ringing the bell vigorously. As the bell rang loudly, drowning out the members' curses, Leon switched his badge and once again slammed the lectern, speaking righteously and sternly. "If it was just cursing me, it would be fine. But the finance minister just came up to say a few words and was attacked, his life now hanging in the balance. Don't you all feel ashamed?" Taking advantage of the sudden drop in the members' provoked anger, as they were in a state of bewilderment, Leon pounded the lectern a few more times to stabilize the situation, then shouted to the crowd below, "Don't just focus on the assassin. Quickly, a couple of people come up and carry the minister down for medical treatment to see if there's still hope." With the finance minister in a coma and Joshua dazed, Leon, as the acting president of the upper house, was the highest-ranking person present. Upon hearing his command, several guards quickly ascended the stage and carried the finance minister down. Along with the finance minister was Marquis Morley, who also had 2 ribs broken by the guards piling onto him, his face pale with pain, unable to utter a word. But Leon, as the acting president, didn't feel a moment of sorrow for the absence of these 2 important members. He immediately picked up the small hammer, tapped the golden bell twice, and loudly said, "Ladies and gentlemen, even though we lack the participation of the finance minister, the upper house parliament should not stop because of this. The proposal we are about to vote on is to increase citizens' universal suffrage and expand the seats in the lower house. Are there any objections? If not, then..." Wait! Just as the acting president was about to forcibly continue the meeting, the middle-aged female parliamentarian who initially stood up to oppose the princess alongside Earl Evans and Marquis Morley, claiming the princess was undermining the kingdom, stood up again. "The vote on the officer replacement order was too hasty just now. I demand a revote." Stopping Leon's antics, the middle-aged female parliamentarian shouted angrily, "Also, I don't recognize your position as acting president. You're completely messing around. In my capacity as a listed parliamentarian in the upper house, I initiate an impeachment against you. And furthermore, request an immediate temporary vote to remove your acting president position. After speaking fiercely, the middle-aged female parliamentarian stepped out from the crowd, climbed onto the main stage, and shouted to the members below. Members, now, those who believe he is qualified to continue as this upper house president, please raise your hands. Whether he is qualified to continue as president. As the inquiry from the middle-aged female parliamentarian fell, the hall fell into silence. From the time a certain Duke of Lionheart and prospective prince took over the parliament to now, the once sacred and solemn parliament had been thoroughly turned into a farce. In the face of such an absurd scene, even the staunchest princess factions couldn't stand up now to declare Leon qualified to continue as this upper house president. Very good. Seeing the almost silent crowd with only a dozen hands raised in total, the female parliamentarian on the stage couldn't help but smile, then turned her head to look at Leon and said triumphantly, "The result of the vote is already clear. Now I announce the removal of your—" "What are you doing?" "I'm taking out evidence." Grabbing the middle-aged female parliamentarian's hand, pulling out a token and 2 documents, and slapping them into her hand, Leon explained, "This is Bauhinia family's token, as well as the commission signed by the current head of the Bauhinia family, Miss Emma, authorizing me to represent the Bauhinia family in the upper house parliament, and the authorization document allowing me to exercise all rights of the Bauhinia family's official president's seat." With the middle-aged female parliamentarian's bewildered expression, Leon grasped her arm and shook it, then turned sideways, addressing the amazed members below. According to the Kingdom Code established at the time of the upper house's founding, proposals opposed simultaneously by the president and vice president are considered not passed. Proposals simultaneously recognized by the president and vice president are considered directly passed unless the royal family raises objections. Now, in accordance with the Kingdom Code, I declare the proposal to abolish my acting president position not passed. You can step down. Bauhinia family's token and authorization document? Looking at the things Leon produced and verifying their authenticity, not only was the middle-aged female parliamentarian on the stage taken aback, but the members below were also caught off guard. The combined seats of the president and vice president directly equate to 2/3 of the upper house parliament's direct approval. As long as the royal family doesn't use the veto power, they can directly block or pass a proposal. There indeed is such a clause in the Kingdom Code, but that was from several hundred years ago when the kingdom first started, when the combined power of the Lionheart family and the Bauhinia family could even overshadow the royal family, which is why such a clause existed, representing the royal family's respect for the kingdom's double pillars. However, several hundred years have passed, and the once kingdom's double pillars are long gone, with the Bauhinia family's rebellion wiped out 6 years ago, leaving only a single heir, and the Lionheart family barely surviving, left as a hollow shell drained by the princess. But even though things have changed completely, this clause has indeed remained in the Kingdom Code for hundreds of years, even being valid until 6 years ago, so, according to the Kingdom Code, now the entire upper house is controlled by this bastard president. You can't count this. Feeling stifled by the trump card Leon suddenly drew, the middle-aged female parliamentarian's lips turned blue, yet she insisted, "Even though you hold the Bauhinia family's token, I now initiate a temporary proposal to strip you of your member status." Cutting off the middle-aged female parliamentarian's words, under the bewildered gazes of a crowd of members, Leon first raised his left hand. Upper House President approves. Then he raised his right hand. Vice President also approves. After that, Leon reached out and removed the member's badge from the middle-aged female parliamentarian's chest. In her bewildered gaze, gestured politely towards the door, and said politely, "Proposal passed. You are no longer a member of the upper house. Please step down." Aren't you going too far? Not even pretending. With a legal procedure that Leon decided on with his own 2 hands, the middle-aged female parliamentarian's face turned livid. She turned her head towards Prince Freckles on the throne, shrieking, "Your Highness Joshua! He's completely out of control. Please use the royal family's veto power to reject his ridiculous proposal." "All right, I'm a prince, representing the royal family in attendance. I have a veto power." Hearing the reminder from the middle-aged female parliamentarian, Joshua, whose mind had been frozen by Leon's series of actions, suddenly awakened, then instinctively sat up straight and glared. However, just as he slammed his palm on the armrest of the throne, preparing to speak up in rebuke, he found Leon skillfully rolling up his right sleeve, looking at him with eyes full of comfort. Looking at the eager face right in front, clearly ready to come up and slap him, Joshua instinctively shrunk back, his hand sweeping back and forth on the armrest to clear non-existent dust. "Better just let it go. It's not that I'm cowardly, but this female parliamentarian and I aren't on the same side, and I also want the replacement decree to pass. So what am I randomly supporting her for? Moreover, I'm a prince, and in the future will become king. There are so many members looking at me from below. If I'm slapped and cry in such an important occasion and make a fool of myself, how can I maintain authority after I ascend the throne? So, consider yourself lucky. Keeping the big picture in mind, I'll let you go this time." After glaring, sneakily glancing at Leon, Prince Freckles, feeling insecure without his uncle's support, lowered his head and began picking his nails. "Your Highness!" Seeing Joshua rise angrily, the middle-aged female parliamentarian assumed he was ready to stand up for justice and rebuke the acting chairman for his antics, her heavily made-up old face full of surprise and delight. However, she didn't expect that Joshua slapped the armrest, glared, and posed as if he wanted to stand for justice, but ended up just posing. Didn't even utter a fart. The middle-aged female parliamentarian couldn't hold back, exclaiming angrily, "Joshua, Your Highness! Your significance in representing the royal family is to supervise the parliament on behalf of His Majesty. Prevent people like him from acting recklessly. If you don't stand up at such times, where is the royal family's dignity?" Indeed, upon hearing the words of the middle-aged female parliamentarian, Prince Freckles suddenly stirred. If he doesn't stand up and speak now, he would look like he's afraid of the other party, which would equate to disgracing the royal family and be a fatal blow to his personal prestige. However, this thought had just surfaced in his mind and soon was extinguished by Leon's sudden bright look of joy, like a cigarette but dropped in the river. "Let it be a blow then, as there's nothing that can't be hit. After all, if I ignore this matter, at most I will lose some face, but if I handle this matter, first I'll get slapped hard, then thoroughly embarrass myself. If no matter what I do, I can't save face, then stepping forward to get beaten would be outright foolishness. Wouldn't it? It seems His Highness Joshua also agrees with my temporary proposal." After standing at the main platform for a while and realizing Joshua wouldn't speak, despite the protest screams from the middle-aged female parliamentarian, head down, solely focused on picking his fingers, Leon sighed in disappointment and turned to the audience. "Two guards. She's no longer an upper house member. Has no authority to stay here. Drag her out. You! Let me see who dares." When two guards really came forward intending to take her down, the middle-aged female parliamentarian burst into anger, gripping the podium tightly and shouting hysterically, "I am an earl of the kingdom. My family has been members of the upper house for 200 years. You have no right to revoke my membership. And you too. Damn it. Don't pull me. Get lost." Never having handled such a special situation, facing the tantrum of the middle-aged female parliamentarian, the two guards appeared at a loss. With her now clutching the podium, forcibly pulling would be difficult, and while she's no longer a member, she's still an aristocrat. They couldn't simply knock her unconscious. Could they? At a loss for action, the two guards first attempted a pull, but directly tore a large hole in her dress, exposing her shoulders. They immediately hesitated further, helplessly looking toward Leon with hope that the powerful acting chairman could offer a solution. "Really? Can't even handle this small matter and need me to teach?" Noticing the imploring glances of the two guards, Leon helplessly shook his head, then pulled out a rope from his pocket and handed it to them. Still not understanding? Looking at the somewhat bewildered guards, Leon sighed and pointed at the middle-aged female parliamentarian clutching the single podium and howling. She's holding onto the podium, so just tie her and the podium together, then take them both away. Won't it work? Of course. Receiving guidance from the acting chairman, the two guards suddenly grasped the idea, proceeding as Leon advised by tying the middle-aged female parliamentarian to the single podium with a rope and then carrying both away. With no lectern, Leon was unperturbed, quickly picking up the documents dropped to the ground, holding the small silver hammer and gold bell, returning to the throne at the top of the main platform. Move over there. Shoving the trembling Freckles Prince aside, revealing a large portion of the seat, Leon placed the documents onto the wide throne, and amidst countless collapsing gazes of the parliamentarians, tapped the small gold bell twice with the hammer, inviting, "Let's continue the meeting." Honestly, are we holding a market meeting now? Facing Leon's enthusiastic invitation, witnessing the bullied Freckles Prince whose face turned green but didn't dare utter a word, the audience finally couldn't hold back. You moodily raise your hand again, passing it as 2/3 agreement. Joshua is spineless, doesn't dare to confront you. So is this upper house now just your playground? Anyone standing up against you is directly expelled. Tied up as if being butchered, carried away. Who dares to make trouble with you now? You want anything passed? Just self-vote and approve it yourself, easily done. Why do you insist on bothering us? Acting Chairman, Your Excellency. Facing Leon's illegal actions, a silver-haired elderly parliamentarian stood up, mockingly and sarcastically said, "The upper house assembly you presided over will definitely be recorded in kingdom history. Whether it's the replacement decree or the proposal to expand universal suffrage, decide whatever you like. We won't accompany you. Aha! Slow walk. Won't escort." Receiving sarcasm, Leon wasn't angered, instead glancing around, politely suggesting, "Is anyone else like him? Against the replacement decree and proposal to expand universal suffrage? If so, you can leave together. Rest assured, I won't revoke your membership. The Parliament is a place for open expression. If you want to leave, go ahead. Don't worry about consequences. Since the acting chairman, Your Excellency, said so, we won't accompany anymore." Hearing Leon's words prompted another parliamentarian to leave their seat, heading towards the door, followed by one parliamentarian after another standing up, leaving with dark faces, occasionally accompanied by low curses. Ridiculous! Don't think being a prince allows you reckless actions. His Majesty definitely won't tolerate this. Today's happening surely won't end here. Touching the black sheep's horn with fingers, watching parliamentarians with black and purple souls leave one by one through the main doors, observing the greatly cleansed soul realm of the Parliament Hall, Leon couldn't help but squint contentedly. Ladies and gentlemen, once most of the opposing parliamentarians had exited, Leon struck the small gold bell with the hammer and announced with a slightly shy expression, "Unexpectedly, so many oppose me. Evidently I'm truly unsuited to be the chairman. Sincerely ashamed, so I declare a temporary recess now. Please remain seated and don't wander, while I and His Highness Joshua go over to the palace to invite someone qualified to preside over this assembly. Quick, quick, quick. The leader has left the council." Just as Leon was dragging Joshua out of the council hall, forcibly shoving him into the carriage, a somewhat portly middle-aged man 8 streets away on a clock tower put down his binoculars, turned around and anxiously asked, "Is everything ready? What's the situation at the palace?" "Just a little more." Upon hearing the middle-aged man's inquiry, a bald woman nearby answered, "Although the head of the Virgo branch has gone to the dream realm, she left 2 anomalies in the palace. Luke can't pass the threshold she set. We still have to wait for the leader to come and find a way to get him into the palace." "What about the others? How are the others prepared?" "Phoebe and I are ready." A woman who looked a bit old but had young eyes replied, "Last night we sneaked into the barracks, erased part of the messenger's memory at the academy, and implanted a fake signal flag code into him. Now, no matter how the palace sends a distress signal for reinforcements, the messenger in the barracks will interpret it as a peace signal. Before the commotion spreads thoroughly, the barracks will not send anyone to help. Teague is ready too. At this moment, a man not far away, also equipped with a telescope, reported with excitement. Lowther Arcade is already on fire. The police department and other patrolling people have been drawn in by the fire Teague set. Even if they discover something wrong with the palace, they won't be able to come over in a short time. It's ready here too. Old Owen has hired several carriages, waiting by the main road. As soon as we start, they'll crash the carriages directly. I have no problems here either. Several atmospheric towers have been taken over, and there are no other observation points nearby. The station people outside the capital won't notice any oddities. Me too. The ambush on Redwood Street is ready. If any noble's private soldiers are dispatched, we can act at any time. I'm ready too. If anyone evacuates from the palace, we can immediately. Is everything almost ready? After taking another look at the area near the palace through the binoculars and confirming there were no obvious flaws, the middle-aged man who spoke first couldn't help but sigh in relief. Since everything is ready, then send the signal and have everyone prepare themselves. The leader is already on the way to the palace. Should be there in a few minutes. Once he manages to sneak Luke into the palace and ensures the princess's safety, immediately launch the assault on the palace. Also, keep an eye on your respective tasks. We're down to the last stretch. Make sure not to mess up at this point. Re-equipping the binoculars to look at the carriage heading towards the palace several streets away. The portly middle-aged man, face flushed with excitement, said, "All those opposing senators in the upper house have already been caught. As long as nothing goes wrong here, if we succeed in storming the palace, our dream of many years will." Smack! Halfway through the middle-aged man's words, a hand suddenly slapped across his face, seizing the binoculars abruptly. "Ouch, what are you doing?" "The palace. Look at the palace quickly." "The palace? Could it be that the people in the palace discovered us?" Upon hearing his comrade's panicked shout, the portly middle-aged man's heart sank, immediately turning his head to look. However, under the sunlight, the palace remained as quiet as before. No squad of armed soldiers came charging out, nor did anyone come out for help. Aside from the guards on routine patrols and a few gardeners working on the lawn, everything appeared just as it did moments ago, with no discernible difference. What's wrong? After looking twice and failing to notice anything amiss, a hint of confusion appeared on the portly middle-aged man's face. But among the rebels on the clock tower, someone seemed to have noticed something, prompting a series of gasps. What's going on? Is someone else planning to attack the palace? It seems something's about to happen. What is it? What's happening to the palace? What's going on? Seeing the portly middle-aged man still not understanding, the bald woman who slapped him stomped anxiously and said, "The people! Look at the people! The people?" Upon hearing the bald woman's reminder, the portly middle-aged man was slightly taken aback. He quickly squinted towards the palace and, like the others, drew a sharp breath. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual, but upon squinting and looking carefully, be it the patrolling guards or the gardeners on the lawn, they all exuded a strange metallic sheen. Besides the strange sheen, the movements of the guards and gardeners also became peculiar, as if their bodies had undergone some bizarre simplification of joints, becoming mechanically rigid, looking just like living tin dolls. Having finally realized what was wrong, the portly middle-aged man quickly snatched back his binoculars, looking towards the palace. Through the binocular lenses, those who were once flesh and blood had indeed turned into tin dolls, their original human eyes replaced with pairs of colorful glass beads. On faces with a metallic luster, where the mouth should be, lines extended from the corners of lips downward like a puppet's chin, occasionally mechanically opening and closing, thoroughly resembling toys. What frightened the portly middle-aged man even more was that the area of these tin doll people seemed not limited to near the palace, but was spreading rapidly outward. First to the sentry posts facing outside the palace, then outwards to the outer wall and ramp, followed by the small square connecting with the ramp, and finally to the bustling street beyond the small square. As if part of some strange, spreading epidemic, originating from the palace and dripping onto a huge white sheet of paper, one by one, human beings were uncontrollably transforming into tin dolls. And those who inexplicably turned into tin dolls seemed unaware, continuing in their tasks as before their transformation, completely oblivious to the changes occurring within them. Wait a minute. While astonished at the distant transformation, the portly middle-aged man suddenly remembered something, swiftly turning with his binoculars, searching among the buildings for the carriage carrying Leon, calling frantically, "Where's the leader? Where has the leader gone?" Upon hearing the middle-aged man's shout, the rebels startled by the palace's mutation also realized, according to their original plan, their leader was now supposed to be infiltrating the palace as an insider while holding the prince hostage. Yet, judging by the palace's current bizarre state, their leader would likely not only fail to infiltrate but would also turn into an iron-skinned person upon approaching with the carriage. Send the signal. Send the signal quickly. Yes. Quickly signal the leader that the palace cannot be approached. Too late. It's already too late. Pointing towards the small square before the palace, the bald woman lamented. The leader just went in.